Alright, this is a space with Ryan Matta. This is his thing. He's got his landing page or whatever. He's got a special guest. Her name is Elizabeth Lane. This is her. Let's go ahead and kick off into it. Hope y'all enjoy it.
All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the space. I'm sorry I put my mic on mute there for a second. We were just bringing everybody up. We're going to kick this space off. We got an amazing group that's going to be speaking tonight. We got Elizabeth Lane. She's the amazing investigative journalist. You guys have probably seen her on spaces like Redacted, Tucker Carlson. She also does her own podcast, and she's doing a lot of work trying to get Tyler Robinson, this new attorney. So I thought it'd be a great opportunity to bring her up. And we're going to kind of start the show off by doing a little bit an interview. So I wanted to let Elizabeth come on and introduce herself. We're going to kind of get into this interview. We're going to bring everybody up. We're going to do a round of questioning. We got Gen X girl who's going to be coming on doing a breakdown with all the influencers that are getting paid from Israel. She just got her work retweeted by Marjorie Taylor Greene today. She's been doing some excellent work. And then we have Cullen, who also has done an investigation. He's going to be joining us at 11 o'clock to break that down. So we're going to be going from 9 p.m. all the way till midnight. And then at midnight, Truth Teller is going to be kicking off his space, and he's going to be doing the after space at midnight. So we got a long night ahead of us, and hopefully you guys are ready for it, and we'll get it started. So Elizabeth, welcome to the show. I'm not sure if this is your first Twitter space, but I think you can see how the mic works.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Ryan. And yes, this is the first time for me, so it's going to be a little rocky. I apologize. But I'm going to try and I don't know. I guess I don't really use X as much, as you can see, guys. So it's like all new for me on X. I usually use my own platform and Instagram. So, but I'm adopting fast.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. So just a little bit of a trick when you're not talking and somebody else talks, if you just mute your mic, that way the audio doesn't come back in, because sometimes it comes back in when you're talking. Other than that, you sound like you got up here great, and you're doing a great job so far. So I'm really excited to get into this interview. Can you start and tell us just a little bit about yourself, your background? I know the first time that I seen your work was on Redacted last week, and I was absolutely mind blown at what you're doing and the investigations that you've been involved in. And then I tried to catch up and watch a little bit of what you were doing on Tucker, and I was just like, I'm absolutely mind blown by the work that you've been doing and the connections that you have. And it's the first time I'm hearing about you, so I think a lot of our audience would like to get to know you a little bit. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in journalism, and we'll kind of go from there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been doing this for a while now, but I started out as an actress and as a producer. I know it's funny, completely. Well, I shouldn't say completely different industry, as journalism and acting in a way are tied, and intelligence agencies are controlling both, so they've got something in common. But I started out as an actress, and it was just not doing for me because it was all fake. I didn't enjoy the industry. I tried to do something meaningful, and when you wake up and you're like, okay, what am I doing? Like, I got to change the world somehow. This is not working. And I had extensive experience in the radio. I'm from Europe originally. If you couldn't tell from my accent, I'm from country of Georgia. I was born there, but I've been in the US for 15 plus years now. So I'm a US citizen, Georgian born, and my official degree is actually law and international relations, so I understand politics better than most people. Mostly I focus on Eastern Europe, what's going on in Ukraine and Russia and all of that. I've got a lot of work done on that part. I was at the front lines in Russia as well. It's a whole another story. So it's very interesting. Got in when most journalists could not. I do have a lot of connections, mostly from my acting times, like acting career. And yeah, I mean, journalism has been part of my life for a long time now, and I enjoy what I do. Charlie's case was a little bit different for me, because honestly, I didn't really plan on being on it at all. It just so happened that I moved to Utah. I was living here, and when this happened here, one of the cases that I was my dream to solve as an investigative journalist was always Kennedy's case, right? So I spent 6 years on that, and I can possibly say that I know who killed Kennedy. The problem is, it's very hard to actually prove it, but circumstantially I can tell you, of course. But the problem is we don't have enough to prove it, right? So what happened is, when I was in Utah, I was like, I just had it with all these assassinations and attempts and all of that. And when Charlie Charlie got assassinated, I was like, okay, I'm not letting this go. This is not going to be another candidate. This is not going to become another case where Americans will just eat it up and say nothing and do nothing. So that was like the first motivation. That's how I started. And then I had this idea, which some people think was a crazy idea, but I disagree. I was like, well, how do I get to this kid, right? Everyone was talking about cameras and videos, and I was like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna let Candace handle the video parts of things, even though I'm gonna follow this case. But the key here is Tyler Robinson. You can look at hundreds and hundreds of videos. You can talk to people. You can try to piece this story together, but the kid is sitting in prison. Like that's your real witness. That's your key. Like whether he did it or not, you have to get to him. So that's how this idea of me getting him a lawyer came about. And I was at the hearing when the first hearing happened, which was by itself the weirdest freaking thing. Because what I experienced, I've been to hearings before and I've never experienced anything like that before. I showed up and I expected there to be thousands and thousands of people. And I was very surprised when I saw like maybe 22 journalists, like including me, somewhere like that. And the room was made for like 75 plus. So I was like, really? This is not like one of the highest profile cases out there? Like you guys don't want to be part of it or something? Like what's going on? So he and I believe it was NBC was sitting up front listening to the case. And what was odd about this whole thing is parents were not there, no family members were there, no friends, no nothing. I mean, this kid is from, you would look at it like a normal family, right? So it's like, okay, so at least someone would show, you would think that someone would show up for him. You would think that cousins or somebody, at least no one was there. It was just us journalists. They wouldn't allow phones. They wouldn't allow any electronics. The only thing they did allow was like laptops if it had no recording device or anything. And then another weird thing was they went to recession super fast. I mean, we got in, judge opened, Scordis came and said something. I don't recall exactly what his like whole speech was about, but that was it. And then they said, oh, we are going for recess and you will not be allowed back in. I was like, that's weird. So not that I'm a judge or anything, and I know like how the court system works, like, down to perfection, but I've never seen anything like that. So I thought it was weird. So after I came out of it, out of the hearing, I was like, okay, it's time to hit like some law firms that get this guy a lawyer, because he didn't have a lawyer back then when this happened during the first hearing. You probably remember he didn't have a representation. So I started looking for a lawyer. I went to different firms. What surprised me was every lawyer that I talked to, and those are mediocre lawyers, they're not your high-level super certified in like, death penalty cases, but I had to start somewhere. So each and every one of them agreed to help if they couldn't represent, at least to help. But the reason for it was because they all believed that something was going on. I did not encounter a person that said, you know what, you're crazy, this is just some, scrawny kid decided that he ate Charlie and killed him. Not one lawyer that I think are unbiased, like mediocre firms, told me that. They were all convinced that something was up. So this is where I was like, okay, so I need to do something about this. Maybe go like with some like, bigger firms that can actually have the certification to represent Tyler. And this is where my detective in New York found somebody, and also another, journalist who's very famous, so I'm not going to say his name, found this guy and sent me a phone number, and he was like, just call him, let's get this done. I called him. We thought that, he would just say, go screw yourselves. He didn't. He ended up being super nice, and he was like, you know what, I actually believe you guys are on something here, so I will represent him pro bono. But the problem is I can't solicit. So you have to get to Tyler or one of the family members, because someone needs to call me as a lawyer to hire me. Otherwise, I can't just show up and represent him. So this is where my second phase of my investigation started, and kind of getting this thing done, like the mission. So I went back to my Utah lawyers and I said, guys, what's the gameplay here? Because I'm in this situation when I just can't do anything. Like I can't get to the parents. I'm trying on that end, but nothing comes up. And they were like, okay, well, you have to possibly get to Tyler then. So, by the way, I'm talking a lot, guys. Does anyone want to interrupt?
No, please keep going. You're on an absolute roll and you're killing it. So we're all here. I'm taking notes, so I'll go over some questions as soon as you get done.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so, and this is where, like, okay, so I had an idea, which I can't say right now because it's in development, how to get to Tyler, and I think it's gonna work. But before that ever happened, I was warned that, hey, so don't reach out to Utah big firms and the firms I can't name, but there's only two, so you probably know. So don't reach out to them because they are in with the states. That's what I got from local lawyer that I was talking to, and I kind of didn't really believe him, and I ended up calling this firm, and they connected me with this specific lawyer. And the conversation was just, I just couldn't believe it. I thought, okay, so he either gonna decline the help or say like, you know what, I would do it, but I'm busy. None of that happened. He was just super rude on the phone. I was told that Scordies was looking for the lawyer and only he, something in terms of like only he can find it or something, which is, by the way, not true. Like anyone can find a lawyer as long as Tyler agrees to it, right? Or says that, hey, this is my representation, I agree to this or whatever. So I was told that, and then they hung up on me. So I was like, okay, well, this is where we are. And then the investigation went into another phase, which again, it's ongoing, so I can't talk about it. But if you have any questions, please shoot. This is how I ended up in this situation.
No, I have so many questions, and I'm sure we got a lot of big people up here. We got Sam and Wolf. They're two of our really good friends, and of course our wonderful host, Maze. If you guys have not already, if you guys could please do me a favor. If you guys have been following my work, you know, we're over here making content and trying to keep eyes and attention on this story, and then there's journalists that are actually there, that are boots on the ground. And I want to say that the risk that Elizabeth's taking, I don't think any of us can really comprehend it. I mean, we watched them literally blow Charlie Kirk's head off pretty much live on TV, and she's doing something that completely, you know, throws a monkey wrench into the FBI's investigation, into everything that they have planned. The PSYOP starts falling apart when so many independent citizens and journalists start getting involved and kind of forcing them to make mistakes, if you will. So I think what you're doing is admirable, and I think your life's absolutely in danger, and I think that these people will do anything to keep you silent. And I think that the bigger we help her get her voice and the more people she has following her and the more attention she can get on her reporting, the harder it's going to be for them to, you know, do anything to her. I've already made a video like saying we're going to place blame on exactly who, if anything happens to you. So I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate the work that you're doing. And can you walk us through this? So you said that there was nobody in the courtroom outside of his parents. Have you been to any other trials? Is that normal? Like, would his parents been allowed to be there? Can they prevent people from having their parents here? How does that work?
So I actually asked, like, I think I mentioned this before, that I'm working with a very investigative, very experienced investigator. He was there during mafia times. He's super old now, but he's good at his job. And just to get a second opinion, I called him after the trial, after the hearing. And I said, so this is the situation. It was me and a few other journalists, like major channels, and that's it. No parents, no nothing. To that, he responded, hey, that's actually normal, because they didn't want to make a clown show out of them, probably. So they probably advised parents not to show up. But here's another problem with that. Yes, I can believe that. Yes, maybe they don't want to face the press. Maybe they are worried, like whatever. They don't want to put their faces on, in front of cameras. I get that. I totally get that. But the courtroom and anyone who was in it, they can probably, they probably saw the same. It was separated. So where press was on the other side. They could have still been there behind the screen, completely protected. I mean, there were a ton of officers. So I don't see why would they be like, not protected there or anything. So I just don't get it.
That's really bizarre. So has anybody had any contact with his parents? Have anybody in the press seen his parents? Has anybody spoken to the boyfriend, Lance? Can you give us a little update on that?
So with the hearing, like I feel like everyone was as confused as I was, and I remember leaving the hearing and turning to a colleague of mine who's from mainstream media. So I don't want to call her a colleague, but whatever they are. So they were as confused as I was, and everyone was complaining. What was this? Like 15 minutes of charade, and we are go home. Like we're told to just go home. So okay, well, So no, nobody talked about Lance. Nobody talked about, which is, by the way, in my opinion, very important figure. Because if you really think about it, everything we know about the story, everything, almost everything, I should say, not counting the video evidence, right, comes from who? Lance, right? That's what they tell us. So don't you think that this is probably one of the most important figures after Taylor Robinson, in the case? Like, it's crazy. So yet, no sign of, any of the parents, even the Tweaks family, none of them were there. So it's almost like the case was going on. I don't know, I'm not a mother, so I can't speak for a mother, but if my son was facing a death row, I'd probably, be sitting at the court and trying to figure out how can I help him. So, by the way, no calls after Candace Owens or any show that I've done with Redacted, no calls as like the only person who asked who the lawyer was you. You would expect that someone would reach out from the family and say like, oh my gosh, you have this expensive lawyer pro bono, what? Like, let's get on it. Like, how do we reach out? Like, no calls, no emails, no nothing. My information is widely available online. Nothing.
This is absolutely blowing my mind. I don't think, like you said, even Jeffrey Dahmer's father was sitting right behind his son and then continued to visit his son every single chance that he had, every single visitation day. If I'm not mistaken, Jeffrey Dahmer's own father was at that prison and, until his son died. So and I think it's so crazy. This whole thing seems like it's all one big setup. And I know that there's been a lot of talk about these intelligence agencies. I know that you have a vast, you've done a lot of research into it. Have you had a chance to look into any of the other false flags from like the Oklahoma City bombing, 9/11, any of these investigations, any of these trials that have seemed like they've been, now looking back, been complete sham trials? I don't know. I'm pretty sure, I'm almost 100% when I'm saying this, Merrick Garland was the judge that sat and overseeing the Oklahoma City bombing case, if I'm not mistaken. And is this something normal? Is it possible that they have the ability to corrupt a whole entire court system and put on a sham trial like this? And this thing's going to be advertised, right? This is like the Casey Anthony trials, the O.J. Simpson trials. There's no way that they're going to completely keep the press out of that courtroom, is there?
Do they have the ability to orchestrate all this? Of course they do. I mean, they had the ability when they killed Kennedy. And you know what's crazy? I really like Megyn Kelly. I do. And I never attack another journalist, even if I don't like them. But I just recently, the reason she came in my head right now is because I just recently listened to her on one of the podcasts where she says like, well, this seems like, to me, it seems like this is exactly what happened, right? I don't see a reason why I should doubt anything. And I just was walking my dog and thinking while I was listening to it, okay, imagine what happened when they killed Kennedy. Some journalists who did not want to do their jobs were sitting and saying exactly the same thing. I don't see a reason why I should distrust the government's version of how they blew the head off of one of the best men that ever lived. Like, I don't see why should I doubt that, right? So this is the problem. How about we start doubting and this is another good thing that actually, we have today, which is everyone has a phone. Everyone records stuff. Everyone is involved. And yes, it is also kind of ground for a ton of conspiracies because everyone has an opinion and everyone's like, oh, did you look at that guy with the backpack, whatever. Well, guess what? This is good because look how many things got cleaned up along the way. Yeah, we had million suspects, some weird kid to some woman to something. Guess what? They came and they said, this is my name, this is who I am, I'm not involved. Like, it always gets cleaned up. So let's start asking questions. It's just what shocks me is that no one is asking questions. No, I shouldn't say no one, you guys are, but you know what I mean. It's crazy.
No, it absolutely is crazy. And you look at these people that are literally like the Benny Johnsons, the Colin Ruggs, all of these people. I mean, Benny Johnson was literally sitting in Charlie Kirk's chair doing his show, hosting his podcast, and they've brought on this like full court press for these Israel first shills. You know, and Candace breaking the major news today, she brought the receipts and showed that Charlie was literally cutting ties with Israel, and she has the receipts to back it up. And then you're looking at the people that have been attacking her over the last week, and it's literally the people that were in the group message trying to convince Charlie, or I mean, playing a role in kind of the bullying and the intimidation against Charlie, and trying to convince Charlie not to turn against Israel and continue on, you know, on course, and do not allow Candace back in the fold. And all these things just they don't represent America. They don't represent American values, and the lack of that these journalists that claim to be Charlie Kirk's best friends. I mean, these guys were like ride or die. Charlie Kirk played a massive role in building up their media presence. I mean, Benny Johnson, you know, in 2022, I think he had like 50,000 or 100,000 followers. Now he's up well over in the millions. You know, Charlie Kirk played a big role in pretty much building up all of these people and making their careers. And to see him get assassinated on live TV, and then people like myself, Wolf, a lot of the people in the JQ considered, you know, Charlie Kirk a rival. We didn't really agree with his talking points until the last 2 weeks of his life, and we kind of stood against a lot of the things, and maybe we didn't realize, you know, what was at stake and what he was dealing with, and the threats are obviously real. I mean, they killed the man, they blew his head off. Like, the threats were very serious. So like trying to attack him and go, oh, well, he should have did this, he should have did that. Why? So they would have blown his head off weeks earlier, months earlier. I mean, it got to the point where he felt like he didn't have a choice, and he was speaking out. And then 48 hours later, literally his head gets blown off. Well, weeks later, but it was 48 hours later that he really started to draw the line in the sand and started to kind of put the pieces together that this Judeo-Christian slop, if you will, that these pastors and the mainstream media and every single politician in Washington, D.C. are trying to feed us. I'm thinking a lot of Americans are waking up and going, wait, something's just not sitting right with me. I don't know what it is, but I can tell when I'm getting gaslit, I guess is the best way to say it. So the lack of journalists that are trying to get to the bottom of this. I mean, has Benny Johnson or any of the big name conservatives, Steve Bannon, have any of these guys reached out to you and offered to interview you or bring you on their platform to hear what you have to say?
No, they have not. There were a few. One you already saw that we've been talking a lot. So I know that I should say, well, Tucker is invested in this a lot, and I consider Tucker to be a national treasure. I don't know what you guys think about him, and honestly, I don't care what people think about him.
I like Tucker. I'm a fan.
Right? Yeah, he's a national treasure, and I always say, I don't know if I should say this because it was said behind the scenes, so I feel he didn't say don't say it, so I'm gonna go ahead and say. He said, I know they're gonna kill me. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, they're gonna kill me. And I was like, well, why don't you intensify your security? Like, get more people. And he was like, what security? I don't have security, Elizabeth. And I was like, what? I was like, dude, you're a national treasure. You no longer have the right to not have security because you speak for American people now. And, I'm a nobody, that I can die tomorrow and no one cares. But Tucker cannot. He almost doesn't have a right to die. You know what I mean? Like, now he speaks for American people. And, but I think Tucker is someone who has given his life to God completely. And he simply trusts God, and he doesn't care. So, I don't know where that puts us, because if anything ever happens to Tucker, I think people should go just bonkers. Like, I think that will be a ground for revolution, So, anyway, sorry, what was the question? If they reached out, no, but there are people behind the scenes that are working very hard to, who are not speaking out about it, but working very hard to get to the bottom of it, which makes me hopeful, actually.
That's crazy that you said that about Tucker, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think that he sees, some people think that he's a CIA asset and his father's CIA, which I'm not going to argue with any of those points, but I think Tucker sees the bigger picture, and that, we can't go on this crusade against the Jews, whether what you think of them or how you think about them, like starting a complete all-out war with the Jews and trying to, eradicate them from our civilization. Although a lot of people have a lot of really good points and think that would be a really good thing to do, I just don't really see it fitting in this society. So trying to figure out a way to kind of get people to stop. I don't really know how you do it, because once you start investigating, you start getting into the Judaism and the religion. I mean, I put out a video today. It was like, if I were to just to read scripture from the Talmud, I'm going to get deplatformed from every single platform except for X right now and Rumble, and that's it. Because I'm just reading the scripture, because the scripture is so disgusting and demonic that when you read it, it makes them look so bad that they have no choice but to deplatform you. So when you come from a standpoint of like, if we're going to debate about Judeo-Christians and it being an actual thing, it's a lose-lose debate. So the only way to prevent that debate is to censor you. And I think Tucker's been a really big advocate for free speech. So I don't really know how this all plays out, but I do think Tucker doesn't want to see our country fall. I think he really loves America, and he has, he's trying to do his best to expose Israel without making the Jews collateral damage, if you will. I think that's the best way to say it. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I always avoid saying Jews just because, they're incredible Jewish people. Jewish people are not the problem. Israel might be the problem, but Jewish people are not the problem. And I always avoid. I'm a Christian myself. I'm an Orthodox, and I'm a believer. So obviously, I have a hard time kind of siding with any other religion, but to say Jews are the problem or Christians or Muslims are the problem, I think we're that's probably incorrect. It's the ugly people who are the problem, and propagandize and misled people who are the problem. I think Israeli government is a huge problem, and I don't know what the way out of that is, to be honest. I feel like we had these debates. I don't know if you've heard of John Kiriakou, former CIA officer. Me and John had this debate a million times over.
He was the guy on your show last week, right? Or the video that you had posted earlier?
That is correct. Okay, he was also he's pretty famous. He was also with Tucker and PBD and many others. But the thing is, me and John cannot agree on a few things. I think that Netanyahu is a CIA asset. That's my personal opinion. I think he always was. Keep in mind that he's an American Jew in a way. He spent most of his life in the U.S. and he does things that cannot possibly be good for Israel. If you really look at what he has done, as long as he's been in power, he actually hurts Israel. He made but a huge part of the United States that were absolutely in love with Israel, hate Israel. That's not Netanyahu made that, not me. So this guy is not a friend for Jewish people. I don't know what his game, actually I do know what his game is, but it's probably going to take us off topic if we go down that route. But I guess my point is that I can't say that Jews are the problem, Christians are the problem, Muslims are the problem. I don't understand Jewish culture. I don't understand Muslim culture. It's not my culture. I don't want to be associated with it. But if we're talking about what the real issue is, it's probably Israel and Netanyahu himself. And of course, I said this to Tucker as well in my interview. I think the question we should be asking is, Netanyahu is doing what every foreign leader would do, which is, I want to steer the United States in the direction I want it to go. Every leader that is given a chance to affect the US one way or another, they will take that chance. The problem is, what the hell is wrong with us and our politicians? Why are you allowing it is the problem. We say we're the strongest country in the world. No one is like us. We are capable of things that other people would not dream. Okay, great. Then why are you allowing Netanyahu to drive you wherever the heck he wants? Why? That's the problem is us, not them.
So why do you think it is that, do you think that Trump is, let me ask you this first. Do you think Trump is one of the good guys, or do you not trust Trump?
Oh boy. I honestly believe that Trump came in with lots of hopes and plans. And I think he had an awakening in a way. He realized that this is much harder than I thought kind of scenario. So for example, every single time he tries to do something 10% good, he ends up doing 80% bad. And no, his administration is not what we asked for. we thought that MAGA would be this, like, almost like a third party that every American dreams of that we don't have. It's only two, and when it gets to war, it's just one. Everybody just agrees. So, but MAGA did not turn out that way, unfortunately. So that's very disappointing. But we have to also, just to give him benefit of a doubt, this is what 80-something-year-old man in power. He comes from the business world and he doesn't know anything about international politics. And when you are in charge of the United States and you know nothing about international politics, which he doesn't, he couldn't tell the difference between Albania and Armenia. So, and he made peace between, Armenia and Azerbaijan. So when that's the case, right, it's really hard for him to understand the level of influence that foreign countries have on us and then deal with it. Because he simply doesn't understand international politics. That's where it starts, And I could go, far about this, like take Georgia, for example, my own birth country and what's happening there. Long story short, the CIA is funding groups. Then these groups are lobbying back in the United States, funding senators here to lobby for a certain policy overseas. Do you see the circle? It is that mind-effed. Like, this is how bad it is. So we pay American taxpayers' money to our intelligence agencies and defense. They put it in some country of Georgia in the opposition party to overthrow the government. And then this opposition party comes back and puts money into certain organizations here. And these organizations go and lobby our senators. This is what's happening. This is a provable case. I worked on it myself. And this is just Georgia, what I know of. Now, you can imagine what happens when it gets to Israel, Ukraine, and other places.
Yeah, and it's not just that. It's the same thing in Guatemala, Mexico, Honduras, Ecuador. Every single country that we've been involved in these regime change, I've done extensive research into this and how they use USAID and all this funding and all these black mark budgets. And they go and they set up these NGOs in these third world countries. And these NGOs fund an NGO that funds an NGO, so it makes tracking the paper trail next to impossible. So when the NGO that funds the NGO that funds the NGO, the last NGO in the row commits the crime, it's literally impossible to track the money trail, and it's impossible to actually pin it back on USAID. Sometimes I might even go as far as saying USAID doesn't even realize what's actually happening. They don't want to know what, or be involved on the ground level, but big picture, it's all pushing their agenda in the right direction. And like Guatemala, for example, the Attorney General, her salary was $30,000. This was like in 2017. So just imagine when we've funneled in $796 million into that country since 2020. Just imagine what damage you can do to a country when you basically have $1 billion budget and the most powerful law enforcement officer in the entire country's salary is $30,000 a year. It's not hard, it's not rocket science to figure out how easily you could compromise these people. And then they go into these third world countries too, and they use USAID, and then USAID funds the National Endowment for Democracy, and the National Endowment for Democracy acts like the staffing agency for basically the CIA and USAID. And then they go and they find media outlets that are failing, and then they buy out and prop up these media outlets, and then they install the people that they've been recruiting in the media outlets. And then once they take control of the media, they use that media to attack any politicians who oppose them and won't do the bidding of the CIA and the USAID and the State Department and our government. And then they amplify the voices of the ones that will. And over a 5, 10, 15-year period, people don't really realize how much power our intelligence agencies have in literally every country. Every country that USAID has been operating in, we, the United States government, our CIA, our State Department, pretty much controls your government, or at the very least has all of the resources in place that it needs to carry out a full regime change in a very short period of time. And it just destabilizes and devastates these nations. And I don't know anybody who has benefited from U.S. foreign policy. Like over the last 50 years, and the amount of money that we've spent, interfering with other countries and their politics, have you noticed, has there been any country that is actually like, you can look back with all the research you've done, has there ever been a country that's like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad the United States government came in and overthrew my government. We're thriving now. We're a thriving nation. Has that ever happened?
Never. Not even once. No, unfortunately, never.
And I know you're friends with Tucker. So how is he? Well, how was he making of this? He was calling for a regime change of Benjamin Netanyahu. So, do you think that we actually are in a position where we might actually see a regime change? Because every time the press comes out with an article and says, "Oh my gosh, Trump's cutting ties with Netanyahu. Trump's upset. Netanyahu disrespected him for the last time." Tucker came on and pretty much said that Trump controls Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu's going around the world and telling all these world leaders that basically Trump's his bitch. And every time that this happens, it seems like there's a ceasefire, there's a plan, Israel violates the ceasefire, and then Trump literally gets out like 2 days later and is giving like a round of applause and telling everybody like how him and Netanyahu are great pals and they're aligned on the same values and all this bullshit. So are we actually going to see a regime change? Do you think there's an actual possibility? Or how do we go about getting rid of somebody like Netanyahu when he has this much power over our government?
Yeah, I don't think that I don't think that regime change is coming anytime soon. And how do we get rid of Netanyahu is very simple. We focus domestically, we pick the right people, and they will get rid of him. That's the only way. How can you go and get rid of Netanyahu, like as the United States, like as people? Like, you can't do that. You have, the only thing you can do, what's in your control, is pick the right people for your government. That's how we do it. Like, for example, take Thomas Messi right now. They're attacking Thomas Messi. I don't know what your thoughts are about Thomas Messi. I think he's incredible.
I love Thomas Messi.
Right. And that's why he's getting so many attacks from all fronts. What we can do is protect him. Now, we know that this is a good guy in government. We can focus on protecting and supporting him. Does he need money? Great, I'm donating. What does he need? Does he need someone to help him? Let's do it. Like, this is how we do this kind of stuff, right? And then when you have Crenshaw and now I forgot the guy's name who's running against him. Like, now you have Dan Crenshaw, and much better candidate running against him, so he can oust Dan Crenshaw, because I feel like everyone here will agree that Dan Crenshaw has betrayed his country and people who believed in him. I was his huge supporter. I know them personally. So when he started out, I honestly believe that here's an American hero. He can change stuff, and somewhere along the way he got corrupted like everyone else. So we know now that someone is running against him. Let's support that guy. Let's try everything to give the voice to him, support him with whatever we can. This is how we end up getting rid of people like Netanyahu, people like Zelensky in Ukraine, and many more, when we pick the right leaders so they can act like Thomas Messi and have our backs.
How do you feel about the fact that our government is, the corruption is like down to its core? I think every single politician, we've kind of played the whole, we're going to vote our way out of this. I mean, we gave Trump the White House, we gave him the executive branch, we gave him Congress, and he hasn't been able to deliver on anything. And I think most Americans are getting pretty blackpilled at this point, because it seems like no matter who we vote for, I mean, the Speaker of the House changed when we switched from McCarthy to what they used to call MAGA Mike. And he was supposed to be this leader, and he was supposed to deliver us to the promised land. And he got in there in the first day in office as Speaker. He comes out of the skiff with Paul Ryan, and now his first bill was to pass another bill for Israel. I mean, our government, every single Republican has basically sold out our country. So how do we go? Like, has this guy in Texas that's going against Crenshaw, as he came out verbally and completely disavowed AIPAC? Because if it's like, there's no point in putting another politician there that's just going to do the exact same thing. It's gotten to a point where it's pretty ridiculous. So if you're not going against AIPAC, which seems to be the only candidates that are Democrats, and we've already went down that rabbit hole, and we know where that's going to lead. They're even worse. So where do you go from here? How do you vote these people out if voting a new person in, and then once they get into office, they just get bribed, blackmailed, or bought off by Israel?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very hard question, because now you're pretty much asking me like how to rectify 60 plus years of corruption. So it's gonna be really hard. Again, like we have to, first and foremost, I think honestly we have to start with media. I know it sounds crazy, but well, what is media? That's how people get their education about politics, right? So if we start with media members, and if we kind of rehabilitate media, then you have educated society. If you have educated society, they will definitely make the right choice, right? Like, I don't know any time in history when you had educated society and somehow they went over the cliff. No, it always happens when propaganda is much more powerful than the truth, and that happens sometimes. It is happening now. So I think we rehabilitate the media. Once we do that, you have younger generation that's more educated. We have to rehabilitate universities as well, because universities are a lot of like another part of hell that needs a complete cleanup. So once you do that, then you can kind of start already focusing on, okay, so maybe now we implement some changes in the government as well, because right now to attack, like Elon Musk tried, by the way, with Doge, right? He went in and he was like, I'm on the attack, let's cut everybody off, and they kicked him out. Like he literally could not even do 1/4 of what he planned to do, right? Because it doesn't happen that we can't just like go horns on against this cliff that's been standing there for, like I said, 65 plus years. So it has to be a settled change from media to universities to new generation, more educated, and then they will probably make right choices in terms of voting, and that's how we slowly do that. But to just attack them like right on, it's almost impossible. So keep in mind, like why is it we had asked this question? Why is it that everyone that comes in somehow ends up supporting Israel, becomes an APEC, bunny, and like, why is it? It's because of what? Intelligence agencies and lobbying. They allow that, right? So, well, how can you fight intelligence? Like everything about intelligence in this country, whether it's NSA, by the way, military doesn't get enough, scrutiny that it deserves, because Navy intelligence is as equally guilty in things as the CIA, if not worse. So you have this like military institution, you have CIA, NSA, similar organizations. Well, how can you fight them? You don't even know where to start. Everything is secret. They have a magic word or a sentence. They call it is matter of national security, period. That's it. Now you don't get to ask questions. If they tell you this is a matter of national security, the debate or questions or any interest ends there. They're not going to tell you anything, right? So you can't do anything there. What you can do is start. Propaganda is a bad word, but it could be, used for good. Like you can start propagandizing people with truth, if that makes sense.
No, that does, but I just look at what Bukele has done in El Salvador, and he went in with his scalpel and he eradicated all the corruption. He cut off all the money flows. He built mega prisons. He arrested the criminals. In 3 years, he turned the safest country, or the deadliest country in Latin America, to the safest country in the world. And I think that we gave Trump and this FBI a mandate, and that mandate was to eradicate the political corruption. We wanted to see interrogations. We wanted to see investigations. We wanted to see raids on these politicians' houses. We know that they're all guilty of crimes. So, like, why are we giving corrupt politicians that we've know committed crimes a pass? And if we don't, and if we keep doing that, whatever makes them not want to act the way that they've been acting if nobody ever gets held accountable for any of the crimes that they commit?
Yeah, I hear you. The difference is El Salvador is very little country compared to us, and it's much easier coming from a very little country like Georgia. It is much easier to make changes there. You can be an authoritarian leader and make everything happen within 4 to 5 years. It's been done before, but for the United States, it's a machine of bureaucracy. And above that, to do that, you have to have a huge intelligence and knowledge in politics and know what your actions, like what consequences your actions might cause. Because here's the problem. Whatever happens in the United States, it is a ripple effect everywhere else. El Salvador, no one cares about. What changed in the world when El Salvador cleaned up its act? Nothing much. Nothing changed. What changed in Russia, Europe, the UK? Nothing, right? But everything that happens in the United States, like world is kind of dependent on us in a way, right? It started with Marshall Plan after World War II. Like all these institutions are dependent on us. So for them to just go in like Bukele did and start doing all of that, it might not be as cool as we imagine it to be. But I agree with you. We are not even seeing like, I would expect that we would at least see that they are trying, and we would be okay with that too. If we saw that they were just trying and they were going in and like, yeah, we understand it's not going to happen overnight, but at least try. And then we got your back. At least start the process.
Man, Elizabeth, you are doing such an amazing job, and I just want to ask everybody, we have over 1,500 people listening to this space. We're probably one of the only spaces that's going to get Elizabeth on here and actually give her the full microphone and listen to everything that she has to say. So if you guys could please do us a follow. Number one, follow Elizabeth, follow Maze, follow all these amazing speakers up here. We're going to go to a round of hands. We got another guest speaker, Gen X Girl, is going to be showing up at 10 o'clock, so we're going to kind of switch the narrative, but I want to give everybody a chance to kind of weigh in and take some hands. So if you guys got some questions, jump up on in here. I know Heather's had her hand up for a while. We'll start with Heather, and then we'll go to the next one.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Ryan. And I'm not familiar with your work, Elizabeth, but I do plan on watching your sit-down interview with Tucker. So, big fan of Tucker. And I have been for a while, just because I feel like, you know, for me personally, I just have a tendency to see, like, the Holy Spirit in people, and I see that in Tucker. I saw it in Charlie when I first met him like 7 years ago when, you know, I started covering Turning Point events as a reporter, and then I myself am an investigative journalist, and I was covering the election fraud, and Charlie was one of few voices in the foxhole with like Steve Bannon, myself, like Jack Posobiec. Like there's like a small handful of us after the 2020 election when all that stuff went down that were willing to speak the truth about what was happening. And I just remember the aftermath of the 2020 election is very similar to the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's assassination. And that was that, you know, when the election was first stolen, right, in lockstep, the legacy media started pushing this narrative called the big lie. And the big lie was that there was no election fraud whatsoever, and that anybody that suggested there was a quote-unquote election denier, and they were in turn responsible for the events of January 6th. This was like the legacy media narrative. And I remember when, like, you know, we were called all these different things, fascists, election denier, racist, or whatever. Then in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's assassination, when people like Candace spoke out, when people like Tucker spoke out, when people like Megyn Kelly spoke out, it was like almost like this same playbook, like almost like in unison. There was all of a sudden all these people, all the legacy media calling people anti-Semitic for simply expressing, you know, certain viewpoints and stuff like that. So just for me personally, like I noticed that pattern, right? The same pattern, the propaganda pattern, if you will. And knowing like I've been involved with Turning Point for like 7 years in different capacities. So I've covered it as a reporter on Media Row. I have been part of their special guest program. Like I got, you know, brought out there. I've interviewed Charlie. I've interviewed his wife. I've been on Charlie's podcast, you know, covering the election fraud and stuff. And what I experienced going through there, like I know Andrew Colvett, I know Tyler, I know all these people. I think for me personally, just to speak about them, I think the world of them, and I know Charlie thought the world of them. And I know in the aftermath of what's been going on, like I'm the person that's like listening to every word Candace is reporting, because as an investigative reporter myself, I appreciate the work that she's doing. And I think there's something to be said about there's a need for journalists to investigate what happens to Charlie and what is going on and to use their voice, right? This is why we have freedom of the press, so that we can do stuff like this, because what people fail to realize is people in the position of Andrew or Tyler or other people at the organization, a lot of them have legal requirements, right? Like I know people that work for the organization that have signed NDAs, right? They're not allowed to legally come forward and say certain things. And so they're sort of bound to some extent, right? And I think for me, knowing some of them, I think Andrew is doing an incredible job picking up the torch for Charlie. I think they've done...
Hey, Heather, I don't mean to cut you off, but we have a few more minutes for the next
work. I'm just excited to watch her interview with Tucker, because I value Tucker, so I feel like if Tucker is bringing her on as a guest, like I'm eager to hear what she has to say. But I honestly, I guess like my only question for her is like, how did she get involved in all of this? But
so if you want to do something like this being in the space, let me jump to the next hand. Let me go to Maze. Go ahead, she's a co-host, and we'll come right back to you, Heather.
Thank you so much, and nice to meet you, Elizabeth. I agree with a lot of it, what you said in your views, your worldviews. I am particularly interested in your discovery around the pro bono defense attorneys that were not. And I guess the clarification point I want is like, were they not allowed to because of him? Has any message or anything come from him, Tyler himself, or was not allowed by the judges, or just the only point I clarify? And thanks for all this information with us.
Thank you so much for the question. And just want to clarify something, Heather. It's not Tucker who has me on. I have Tucker on. So I went there. Yeah, no, you're good. You're good.
I just saw a tweet, and I know, like, I saw you and Tucker, and then I saw all of the propagandists, like, coming out trying to, like, character assassinate you. So it just made me watch whatever the interview was that much more.
Oh, guys, it's gonna be good. I asked something and I warned him, and Maze, I'm so sorry, I'll get to your question right away. So I asked him to do something that he hasn't done in any other interview, which is to talk about his dad, his father. So it was absolutely amazing. So yes, it will be a treat to watch for sure. Now I'll get to the question. Maze, thank you so much. Maze, right? Is it Maze?
Yes, that's correct.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your question. So, no problem with, I'm gonna separate these lawyers in two camps, right? So the high-level lawyers in Utah, which is too firm, the ones that hung up on me and pretty much were super rude on the phone, that's different. They are tied with the state. I was warned about that, but then the group of lawyers that I first went to, which is kind of mid-level firms in here in Utah, in Salt Lake City, and Murray. So these guys could not represent Tyler simply because they were not fully qualified. So you have to be death penalty certified to represent him. That's why I ended up with the New York lawyer, because these guys were like, we would love to. And if you can bring someone who's death penalty certified, then we'll do the heavy lifting. We'll work with him to understand Utah market, but we can't possibly represent Tyler because of this. That was the issue.
Oh, now I totally just remembered who you are, Elizabeth. I'm so sorry. I remember you from one of the episodes Candace actually did, where you were reaching out to try to get an attorney to represent Tyler. That makes sense. So did you ever actually, I do have a question for you, did you ever actually make contact with Tyler or his family? Like, I'm late to the chat, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, so it's in the process right now, so I can't really talk about it. I could not make contact with Tyler when I needed the most, like when I had the lawyer and he had to affirm that, yes, I want this guy as my lawyer. That did not happen. That's why we ended up with this woman that's a lawyer right now. By the way, I reached out to her too. So I don't know when she's going to respond, if she even responds. If she does, I'll update you on that, Ryan. But right now I'm just waiting for her to respond.
Go ahead, Maze. Hey, hold on, Heather. We got a bunch of hands, so we gotta go in order.
One more.
All right.
One more.
That's it. Yes.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure it was you that mentioned that the family was in witness protection. Was that you that?
No, it was not me who discovered that. I was told that because I was trying to get to the family, and that shocked me actually when I heard from someone who has been near the case. Well, I should say has been near to the family themselves. Like that, someone mentioned that the family was in witness protection, and that was really odd to me, because that's another call that I had with my New York detective, because I was like, okay, so I'm gonna call this New York detective John. His name is not John, but I just don't want to say his real name for his own, protection. So let's say I called up John and I was like, John, have you ever heard of any case, even if it's a highly profile case, like a high profile case, and all the attention the nation is on it, have you ever heard of anyone going in witness protection? And he was like, no. He said, I had cases when I put up family in a hotel of a person that murdered somebody just for their own protection. That happened many times in my career. He said, like we would just ask them not to stay in their house for their own protection. So we would
take them and put them in a nice hotel for a week, sometimes a month. That's normal, he said, but to go in a witness protection, like that is really weird. So that information is not verified because I have not talked to the family. The only person that can verify that is if I go and see the family and they say yes, like it was a case when they asked us for, to go in witness protection. So otherwise I wouldn't believe any other sources that say, oh, family says this and family says that. And I know even Candice mentioned a few times that family said that and this, but who's saying that? That's what we need to ask. Like, okay, so who's saying that? Because no one, seems to me, no one is in touch with the family directly. So who's talking about this stuff, right?
Go ahead, go ahead, Mace.
Sorry, just one last point is that, so I know that there was some talk about this, and I'm not sure if this actually happened or not, but was there a reward given to the father for turning him in? I mean, with what Candace reported, saying kind of like the opposite which was that they don't think he's guilty. They they were talked into basically him turning himself in. But if they were to receive that money, then wouldn't they want to at least pay for the defense? It's just very odd. The whole thing is very, very peculiar. I don't know if you know whether or not that was confirmed, but I am curious to see if that would at least be able to pay for their defense. Honestly, I have no idea if the father ever claimed a reward or any type of money. I never even got interested in it. I probably should, but it's just I've been so focused on the other side of the investigation that I never even, had a chance to actually figure out if he got the money or not. If he did, I think it's very unethical. What kind of father takes the money and then not gets the lawyer? It's just really weird. But again, like I can't talk about what I don't know. Even with the whole shooting Charlie, the shooting itself, there are so many versions. There are people who say that it was an exit wound. Some say it was not. Well, here's the thing, what I've learned about the wound itself, right? So, because it does make sense. These people are not crazy when they say it was an exit wound. Even former CO O'Neill came out and said, oh, what we are seeing is an exit wound. But here's the problem with that. Again, O'Neill is someone who has seen ton of dead bodies, wounds, and so on. That's great. But O'Neill is not someone who has worked with, autopsy professionals and knows what happens to the body when they are shot in a way, because O'Neill kills and he walks away. That was his job. And I love O'Neill. I'm not dissing on him or anything. I'm just saying we don't want to get crazy conspiratorial things that we don't need to. Conspiracy is there, I have no doubt, but it would help the case if we don't add on to stuff that, oh, it was absolutely an exit wound or entrance wound, right? So again, when I speak to my detective who has been involved with ton of autopsies, because when you are a lead detective in New York City and when bodies are dropping left and right and you have to go through the entire process, the court, autopsies, all of that, you kind of know this better than a special ops guy, right? So he told me personally when I pushed on, is this the exit wound? What are we looking at? He was like, Elizabeth, listen, it does look like an exit wound. He said that. But here's the problem with it. He said, if the bullet jammed in Charlie's body, which is also a possibility depending on what gun was used, he said, in that case, it could be both, he said. And that really surprised me. He said, here's what it can be. Depending on a gun, if someone, let's say, that someone fired and the bullet got jammed in his neck, right in the throat, part of his throat. In that case, it could be both entries and exit wound, because what happens is bullet itself kind of explodes and you would see that kind of effect with all that blood. It's possible, he said. Now, the only way to actually tell is to look at the autopsy report. Is it possible? Yes. Again, it could be an exit wound or it could be both, exit and entrance wound, right? So that's something that I'm learning myself because I'm not an expert. I've never shot anybody. I hope I never will. So I don't know. That's why I have someone who has experience in this stuff. And every time something is not okay or doesn't sit right, I call him up. I'm like, okay, so this is what we have. Can you look at this? Can you analyze this? Look at this video, look at that. And
I'm not just going as a journalist. Like, journalists cannot solve this practical stuff. Like, it has to be solved by a professional. You know what I mean?
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I got enough. Nate, you got one more? I was going to go to Derek.
I was just going to thank her for her answer. Go ahead.
And Elizabeth, how much time? How much time do you have left?
I mean, I can go 20 minutes max.
Okay, sounds good. Go ahead, Derek.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. I've been following you on Primal a lot. So one thing I wanted to say is I think that, you know, that prime minister that got assassinated, I think it's in 1995 in Israel. I think he had the right mind,
Rabin, right? Rabin? Yes, exactly.
Yeah, Rabin. I think he had the right mind. I think that's exactly why he got assassinated. And I do actually, you know, want to say their own people in Israel, the day he got assassinated, they went into the streets and they were like, is a murderer. So I do think that he might have something to do with that, right? And I think the fact that his own people went into the streets to say that he was a murderer indicates that he might have had something to do in the assassination. And I don't know if it was ever investigated, but we should at least get a prime minister in Israel that has that point of view, that all people are human, and that we need to investigate, you know, another point that's not war, because for years and years there hasn't been war. Like, let's say between Christians and Muslims, there hasn't been war for a long time until, you know, the 2000s. And I think we can go back that peacefulness that we had for such a long time. The fact that we're looking for such violent scenarios and that we're following such violent politicians, it just doesn't sit right on my mind. And we need to look for different alternatives. And I think that the young people are the future that we need to look into, right? Because our generation, we're stuck in the middle.
Yeah, none of that really seems like it's organic. It's definitely infused. I think pitting all these religions against each other is to justify, you know, the next move is to create the fear and to be able to have some sort of justification what they're doing. But thank you, Derek, for your. If there's anybody else on stage that has a question for her, then by all means, ask away. Or I definitely have another one and some thoughts on Israel. And I think one of the things that I just want to highlight really quickly while I can is that him calling out that there's a lot of pressure to cancel Tucker Carlson, and him actually losing the $2 million donation, and actually not now whether or not the whole Hamptons thing is real and whether or not there was $150 on the table, $150 million is another story. I guess, you know, we'll just wait for that evidence to come out. It just shows that, you know, the amount of influence that they want to have over the perception of people is only because it matters. What we think matters. What we are having agency in our perception of what's going on really matters. And the reason why it matters is because, you know, whether or not we support this could change the game. And I think that this is just one big catalyst, I think, maybe for a whole new level of truth that's coming out about Israel. Unfortunately, October 7th was the first one. And, you know, and I think that Charlie Kirk's assassination is going to be second phase of that. So yeah, but go ahead. I see that James put his hand up. Go ahead, James.
Yeah. I'm unmuted. Okay. The big problem we have a lot of things we can't know. I'm an expert witness in court, and I hear people, they feel stuff, but they can't prove it. Now, here's the thing. I did a little work with the sound and the one shot from the side. And the big problem is that the speed of a bullet is known and the speed of sound is known. So it's an obvious thing. The sound is way too close to the impact. So I can tell you that it is really, really spooky to see it almost instantaneous when if you're shooting from 130 yards or 150 yards, it should be many, well, I broke it down in frames, but it should be quite a bit slower. The sound should have impacted, and then you hear the sound. So I'm telling you, there's something squirrely going on. This is not doesn't look like what it should look like. I do video editing and I do expert witness stuff. I see this all the time. I say you got to look at the numbers and the data. Your eyes will trick you. And if you take the audio clip and you put it right on the impact, there's no lag. The bullet should hit first, and then you should hear the sound. So yeah, no, this is again. There's no way that shot came from over 130 yards. Not a chance in hell.
Do you have any video breakdowns of this, James, or anywhere your work that we can see some of your work?
I put it in the messages here, so I have it. I have it under my name in the
And the purple pill?
in the comments. Yeah, whatever this thing is. Yeah, the purple one. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, James. I'm gonna shoot you a DM when this gets over and maybe bring you on for an interview. And I'm gonna make a video and promote your work and dive into that tomorrow. So thank you very much.
Because the math is the thing. I've done this in court, and you got to get away from stuff that you cannot prove, and stay in I call it stay in the math and the objective reality. And the speed of sound is a speed of that bullet is a fixed thing, and the math doesn't add up. But you can do it yourself. You can take it, put it in your editor, and put the shot right next to it, and you'll get about one frame at 30 frames a second of how much time that is. So you get down to the minuscule stuff. It should be like 4 or 5 frames differential, and it's not.
And Elizabeth, I saw you open your mic up. Did you have something you wanted to jump in there and see? I know your time's limited. We're going to go play this clip from Candace right after this question, so go ahead.
Absolutely, yeah. I was just, I just wanted to say, James, you're on something. Actually, I would agree with you 100%. And also, people keep saying that somehow the shooter had to have line of sight. Like, that's another thing that not necessarily, guys. Like, today's special ops have thermal vision. If you're just close up to the victim or the target, you can do this in so many ways. You just have to be close enough
the key. Well, when you see all this stuff, you've got a bullet traveling supersonic, and you have an impact, and you have no blood splatter. I'm telling you, that does not happen on. Again, I've been in court. I used to go in and watch the blood spatter guys testify, because I do more computer stuff and like scopes and mathematical timing stuff, and I would hear these guys talk about the blood spatter. Man, it's like they trust me. There's a blood spatter guy out there going, "What is wrong with you people?" And it's again, I don't have to prove what happened. I just have to prove what the FBI is saying is wrong. The lawyers I deal with, because we like you because you know what we're trying to do. You're not trying to do the Perry Mason moment. You're just coming up with the facts that we need to prove what we want to prove. So yeah,
Absolutely.
that's what. Go ahead. Okay.
Thanks, James.
Well, I was just going to make a point that one thing that FBI Director Kash Patel had tweeted out was that this was a little bit ago, but it was after Candace on one of her episodes said that she had been getting information from multiple people and hearing that in the days and weeks leading up to the assassination, there was higher than usual traffic at the home that Tyler Robinson lived at with his trans boyfriend. And when Kash Patel had put out a tweet saying they were investigating different theories and stuff, they specifically mentioned traffic in the days and weeks leading up to that. So what that tells me is that not only is Kash Patel following up on some of the very things that Candace is putting out, it also says that, you know, maybe there could still be bad agents within the FBI. Like, I don't know if maybe Elizabeth, I don't know if you know about this, but how much culling of the FBI has Kash Patel and Dan Bongino had a chance to do so far? Because I know there are a lot of bureaus where they like gutted them, but I don't know of all of them, like, you know, how many agents serving today were serving under Joe Biden, right? Like things like that I'd like to know, just because I feel like prior to Trump taking over, the FBI was ran like a terrorist organization, like literally spying on American people in partnership with things like apparently the ADL, which was labeling Turning Point and Charlie Kirk as extremists and all of these other things. And then Kash Patel also came out saying that they were no longer working in partnership with the ADL. So from my experience, like what I see happening is Kash Patel actually making moves in the right direction. And so that's
Heather, come on now. We're not going to go down this goddamn road here. Kash Patel is compromised as shit. He's covering up the Epstein files. He's an absolute fucking disgrace. We all so we're not going to go down that fucking road right now. I'm sorry.
I mean, we don't have to, but just from my perspective, like I see him going down a good road. And I think Dan Bongino is 110,000% a man of God. And you know, Kash.
Dude, these people are sold out and compromised by fucking Israel. That's what keeps Dan Bongino up at night.
I don't think everybody is compromised by Israel.
I think there are. We're gonna move on because we got a lot of people that want to talk, and we're not gonna go down that rabbit hole.
Okay, but you gotta face a little, you know, criticism here, Ryan. This was Charlie.
Who is not compromised by Israel?
I don't personally think Trump is. Like,
you're serious right now?
Yeah, I'm dead serious. I don't.
Wow, that's remarkable. Can you explain why he just bends over backwards for Netanyahu and bombs Iran and just sends $650 million to Israel on a whim?
Do I think there are a lot of people compromised by various countries? Absolutely, but I feel like
no, not various countries. I'm saying Israel specifically.
Yeah, Israel too, including Israel. Israel's not.
Is there any nation that has compromised the United States as extensively as Israel and Jews?
So I have personally only gone down the Israel rabbit hole relatively recently because
is it a bad idea to comment on things that you're ignorant on, perhaps?
No, I'm not. But I follow.
Wait. So hang on. So you're not ignorant on them, even though you just got down the rabbit hole, or not?
So I'm big in Trump world. I'm not big in Netanyahu world. Sorry.
No, it's just a dangerous thing to get onto spaces and suggest things that you seem to be completely uneducated on.
Dude, I'm sorry.
Well, how is he?
Wait, why is that wrong? I'm not going to go into a knitting forum and discuss how people should knit their sweaters.
I'm not saying President Trump is compromised by Netanyahu. I don't believe he is.
Yeah, you shouldn't. You just said moments ago, you said that you do not think the United States is compromised by Israel. I asked you for an example of that, and you said Trump. I'm not gaslighting. It's a recorded space.
I never said the United States. Play back. I never.
Yes, and you just said that you don't think Trump is compromised, and then I pressed you on the issue, and you said, "Well, I don't really know a lot about it."
I'm not mincing any words. I don't think Trump is compromised. I think President Trump is the greatest president we've had, and that we'll have in my entire lifetime. And
yes, but you're saying that while also saying that you're ignorant on an issue, which is incredibly important, which is him being compromised.
On your timeline doesn't mean they're not happening on God's timeline. Okay, so you
God's timeline?
Yeah, you need to be patient. Just because we didn't win the 2020 election, right? We won it, but just because Trump wasn't put in that moment, everyone was all like, "Oh, this is going to happen, that's going to happen," but it all happens on a different timeline.
What is it that all has not happened? Out of curiosity.
What are you talking about? Just because
You're saying that we haven't gotten along a timeline because of the election.
Wait. Can I say something to Heather real quick? Heather, I'm going to say something. Trump, I voted for Trump 3 times. And you know what? You're sitting here spewing that you don't think that he's compromised. I think he got compromised after they did the hit on him and Butler. And that's when everything changed against him. Because look, he's came out and he said all this stuff that he was going to do. He hasn't really done anything. And for Kash Patel,
oh my God,
he's compromised, man. You open your eyes, dude. Go,
dude. Are you kidding me? Trump has had so many accomplishments, and he's.
Where are the Epstein files, Heather? Can I get the Epstein files? Actually, hang on. Pause. Heather, did Donald Trump run on the idea that he was going to release the JFK and the Epstein files? Yes or no?
Dude, Trump.
Where are those?
Oh my God! Do you not?
No, don't. Oh my God! I'm asking you a direct question.
There's processes for everything.
No, there's not processes. Donald Trump ran that he was going to release the Epstein files, and he then decided that it was a Democratic hoax. And then he had the Republicans vote to seal them.
FBI into a
what am I missing?
No, so what was, okay, so here's a theory, right? Like, I wasn't privy to being one of the influencers that were brought down to the White House to get the binder, right?
Yes, they were largely Jews that were brought to the White House to get the Epstein files. Yes.
You know what? I have friends that are Jews. I think Israel is definitely trying to influence American politics. Like, I'm not going to go down the whole, all of them are bad type of thing, but I do think Netanyahu, I don't appreciate what he...
Is Jeffrey Epstein bad, yes or no?
Yes, absolutely.
Is he Jewish?
I have no idea, honestly.
No, he how do you not even know that? What are you doing?
I don't know that. I'm sorry.
How is that? Okay, so he is Jewish. Ghislaine Maxwell is Jewish. Did you know that Ghislaine Maxwell's father was good personal friends?
Okay, and I have
the father.
Hey, hold on, guys. Hey, Elizabeth has to go. Hey, hold on, Heather, hold on. Elizabeth has to leave, so we want to give her a big special thank you and tell her how much we appreciated her coming on. Make sure you guys swing over there and follow her. I know you have to jump down, so God bless you, Elizabeth, and thank you so much for joining us.
I have a quick, can I say something, Ryan?
Yes, but she has to leave, so she has to run right now, so.
Elizabeth, be safe. Please don't say more than what you have to. Your family and you come first, please, and we appreciate everything you're doing. Okay, thank you. Thank you. God bless you. And by the way, James, thank you for coming up and giving her that information. And I wanted to tell you, Elizabeth, look up in TikTok this gentleman by the name of, if you can write it down.
I got you.
Goon, GOON_6.
GOON_6.
And then after 6 underscore again, and then the word actual, ACTUAL. Very similar what James is talking about. So James, follow him as well and see what he put up in the video. I posted it on my page back on the 28th of September. Mind-blowing. So just look at that. It's all about the distance. Forget about your eyes. It's all about your ears, like James said. Thank you, Elizabeth. And Ryan, this is the first time you've given me the speaker. And Mace, you guys are doing excellent job. I follow all of you. Stephen Gardner that's here. But all of you, I follow you and I thank you so much. Blake, everyone here, okay?
Thank you very much, Cuba.
Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
it's a perfect, thank you, Elizabeth. Go ahead. You want to take the mic for a second?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Ryan. What you're doing is incredible. I wish that, all American citizens were as motivated as you are to save this country. Thank you, guys. You were amazing. I appreciate you all. I do have to jump out real quick. I have another meeting, but it was amazing. I really enjoyed it. So if you have any information or any questions, hit me up. Thank you again, Ryan. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, and please come back if you have any updates or anything you need to break or you need to get more eyeballs on. We'll gladly give you the microphone. So thank you so much.
Will do. Thank you.
All right, folks. Now we have another special, amazing guest. Miss Gen X Girl is going to be joining us. So if you guys aren't fully aware of the deep dives that this girl does when it comes to exposing and connecting all of the dots, she probably does it in a way that's better than most of us. And she just got her work retweeted by MTG today. So she's going to go on and go into the rabbit hole of the amount of control that Israel has over our government, specifically with these influencers. She's done probably more work than anybody I know. And then after that, we're going to jump over and let Ian Malcolm rip. And then we're going to get over to Destiny. We have the amazing Stephen Gardner is up here as well. Stephen, great to see you, brother. We'll definitely jump over to you and pass you the mic here in a minute. So thank you so much for coming up, man. We appreciate everybody being here. So please share this space if you guys haven't. And Gen X Girl, welcome to the space.
Also, please like the channel, please.
Thanks, Ryan. Sorry I'm running a little late. Real life stuff, you know. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, like I was really hoping that a few people would read my article. I was shocked to see that so many did, and I was really happy to see that, just because it's hard on X sometimes to talk about things that are convoluted, and especially things that are like over years of time. And so, you know, sometimes you have to read long form. I wish I had your talent, Ryan, to do videos, to do those, because I also think that's also a medium that can communicate it really well. But anyhow, I've been researching, you know, like Israeli influence into our political system. And then obviously for the last year, you know, influence campaigns and things like that. And, you know, over time you start to see patterns and start to, you know, connect one piece to another. So when this FARA, you know, the FARA documents started getting filed, Mel, myself, I know Sam was also looking at it, and a few other people, Responsible Statecraft was like all over it, posting a lot of articles. And so started digging into it, and I started to see names and connections and things like that started to look, you know, like, wait a minute, I've heard this before, you know, or I've heard these people before, and this and that. So after Mel did her, you know, a few of her posts, and I started to see more names, I decided to just do a timeline. I was like, I've got to just go back to when I started doing this and start plotting things on a timeline to see, you know, where these connections are, because, you know, I have it in my head, but I just want to make sure. And what I saw as I was doing it, like, blew my mind, because what you saw was, you know, in 2018, what I started to research, not in 2018, but, you know, 2 years ago, was that, you know, the Israeli government, there were some leaked documents that the Guardian started reporting on, that in 2018 they were having these meetings. And what they were concerned about was because, you know, public officials were starting to get arrested under FARA, that their dealings in America would be scrutinized and they would be at risk for FARA. In particular, they were trying to set up this scheme.
Sorry for interrupting her. If y'all don't know, these are recorded spaces. This is done by Ryan Matta. I'll show you his profile. You can go on there and give him some love. I try to show people as they're talking, but I'm just a crane operator. I stream these spaces because most people don't know about them. If you hear beeping and crap for a minute, or loud noises in the background, you're just going to have to deal with it for a minute, or go on X and listen to it yourself. It'll be quiet though in just a couple minutes. I just got to get to the crane, but you might hear it's a construction site, so it's beep 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 or loud engine noises or something. All right.
Scheme where they would funnel money from their Ministry of Strategic Affairs into the U.S. But the problem they were having is that no one wanted to touch their money directly from the Israeli government, because they would have to register under FARA. So they went and, you know, they hired U.S. attorneys that specialized in FARA and asked them, how can we do this? How do we get money into the U.S. for influence campaigns, for, you know, projects that they didn't want to have scrutiny? And the attorneys advised them that what they could do was to create a intermediary, a U.S.-based nonprofit that the Israeli government could funnel money to. And then from that nonprofit, they could then funnel that money into NGOs, pro-Israel NGOs that were managed and ultimately funded by Israel. But, tracing that would be difficult. So that's what they set up. And I've seen in the last 2 years the web of NGOs in the U.S. that fall under that umbrella, where they're receiving money through these intermediaries, is vast. And a lot of them are very, very connected and regularly, brief Congress. And a lot of the recommendations that they make to Congress, move forward. One example I'll give you guys is the whole TikTok ban. What you'll find is there's a company that was behind the quote unquote research that was cited to, to show that China is, stealing data and doing all this kind of stuff, and we need to get rid of TikTok because of China. Well, the company behind it, or the NGO behind that, was an entity called NCRI. And NCRI is an Israeli-funded and managed NGO. The former chief censor of the military, of Israeli military, a person by the name of Brigadier General Sima Vaknin-Gil, sits on their board. They also have like a whole bunch of other Israelis that sit on their board. So these are all Israeli entities that are managed, under that direction, but they also receive money. So this entity was hired by a Zionist, billionaire tech person, and they developed this report, and then that person then turned around, created an article, and published it, claiming that, that this was happening, that the CCP was stealing people's money, blah, blah. Never did he disclose in that article that, oh, by the way, I paid for this report through this NGO that's Israeli managed and funded. None of that was ever disclosed. Anyhow, it didn't really, they attempted, a bill was introduced into Congress, but it didn't get passed because the support, there was a lot of backlash, and, it just didn't work. So what happened was, a few months later, as a, sort of a, last resort, the pro-Israel lobby stepped in and just pressured it and said, hey, you got to get rid of them because there's too much anti-Israel stuff. And that's when it got passed. But what you don't hear about is this whole operation that happened when you heard about the CCP stuff. That was from Israel. That was not, another entity. So that's just one example, right? So you see this happening over the years, right? And then, and when the Trump administration came on board, I was hopeful that at least, there was a lot of people that, at least the war would end. And of course that didn't happen. What happened is that on Inauguration Day, if you guys remember, he signed an executive order that stated that he was going to promote free speech, and he was going to basically do away with anything that the Biden administration had done to suppress speech. Everybody was cheering and everybody was excited. I remember the time looking to see, is he going to basically disband a previous executive order that he has signed on the IHRA anti-Semitism, which he didn't. What happened is quickly after, a new executive order was signed that piggybacked off of the 2019 executive order that said, okay, not only is the federal government going to use the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, but now we're going to use the full force of the federal government to go after anybody who's in violation of the IHRA. And it was specifically aimed at going after student protesters. And that's why you saw the sweep of, the visa holders and all that kind of stuff. There were student protesters because they were using the auspices of that construct, right, to go after them. So you see that happen. That happened in January. In February of this year, Pam Bondi, very quietly, on her first day of office, after she was sworn in, signed a memorandum for the Department of Justice, invoking a bunch of changes that she was going to, that her that she was going to roll out from that day forward. One of the provisions in that memorandum stated that the Office of the Foreign Influence Task Force, which is the wing under FARA that actually investigates FARA violators, would be disbanded. Like, that entire apparatus was gone. And that the people working under that office would be reassigned to, immigration and other kind of stuff. So now the FAR office no longer had teeth. The only thing it would do going forward is just file FARA reports. And that was it. And they specifically stated in the change that they were no longer going to go after what they called as weaponization. But what you saw in the details of that document was that they were only going to prosecute people who fell under the traditional, quote unquote, traditional cases of espionage. So unless you go back to when the laws of espionage were written, if you don't fall under those very, old descriptions of what is espionage and things like that, that's it. You're not going to get prosecuted. Bunch of law firms did analysis of that and confirmed that what that meant is that cases where a entity is working on behalf of a foreign government to promote public relations, to promote things of that business relations, right? To promote like an Israeli business here or public relations for the government of Israel, those were no longer going to get prosecuted. And that's important because when you fast forward to see the construct of how the FARA filings were done, the ones that we just saw the last 2 days, it becomes completely clear that allowed this to happen. And so, because what these two entities have done that filed the FARA registration just recently, they don't get their money directly from the Israeli government. What's listed as the foreign agent is the Foreign Ministry of Israel. However, what they're doing, and I know a lot of people I've seen, at least in my chats, I've discussed with people are asking, well, why are they sending the money to an entity called Havas in Germany? And then Havas is paying the registrants, the people that are actually operating in here. Why are they doing that? Why is there like this like hop, right? Well, if you look at the Pam Bondi memo and the legal reviews done by several big law firms that specialize in FARA, they state that if it's a PR entity that's doing this work, they're no longer getting, it's not prosecutable. They're not going after it. That's not something they're worried about. Well, Havas is a PR firm. So the Israeli government is ensuring that under the current construct, under Pam Bondi, that they are totally fine, and no one's going to be able to go after them to prosecute them for anything that they do. So that's how you see the money kind of trickling in. And obviously, for people that have read the FARA docs, one focuses on creating a process for paying, hiring and paying U.S. influencers to basically post and promote, Israeli narrative in the U.S. The second entity is their whole focus is to do target marketing on churchgoers and students on Christian universities. And what they've set up is, or they're planning to set up, is geofencing around churches, places of worship, so churches and universities. As to how far that geofencing is going to be, that will be interesting, because I've thought about, well, what about if you're just driving past the church, right? Like, is your phone going to get picked up? Whatever. I don't know. But, they do have a very clear plan of how, step by step, how they're going to, track all the people going in and out using their phones, then start to send them targeted ads, see which ones are working for them, and the ones that don't, they're going to chuck it. The ones that do, they're going to keep pushing it even more. So it's this constant, barrage of, target marketing. They also have other projects where they're planning on hiring Hollywood actors and people to come and promote a October 7th video to, churchgoers. As soon as you come out of church, they're going to set up buses and trucks and whatever, with promotional stuff to get you to watch it with VR sets so that you get immersed into this experience. And then, and so the focus is really on evangelical Christians, because what I saw from the very exhaustive list of churches, they're all evangelical Christian churches, all Protestant churches that they're focusing on. They're not focusing on, churches outside of that within those 4 states. As to the separation of, which Christian universities, those seem to be all encompassing, and majority of the people that they're targeting are in the universities, because the numbers for the universities were much higher than the churchgoers, which was like 1 point something million. In the universities, you were talking about a target audience of like 4 million that they were targeting. So how did this get set up, and how are the churches allowing this to happen? And so I started to look into that, because what you see is in one of the entities that's called Faith by Works. That entity is directly connected to established mega churches and, and people who are, church leaders with a lot of clout, a lot of power, that, have been in the community for a long time. They're all working together. So what happened is around last year in September of 2024, when the American right started to question and they started to get data showing that younger people online were starting to question the U.S.-Israel relationship, there was, this alarm that went off. So a bunch of these different church leaders within the evangelical church community got together, and they created this entity that's called the Christian Presidents for Israel, something like that. It's in my article, if I got that wrong, but it's literally all the evangelical church leaders of these mega churches that have gotten together and established this organization whose sole purpose is to keep the U.S.-Israel relationship tight and to continue unwavering support for Israel moving forward. And their role in doing that is to keep their flock pro-Israel. At least $1,000. So, and there's a lot.
If you guys, it's truly a gift. And this girl, the work that she does is above and beyond anybody else. And the time that it takes to actually do these deep dives, I don't think if you've never done one, if you've never tried to put together a thread and trying to connect all these darts and then being able to articulate it in a way so everybody can unpack it, it's truly a gift. And she definitely does not get the credit that she deserves. So I'm super excited and privileged to have you up here on our space. You've been doing more work than 99% of us when it comes to unpacking this. And, you're like a little mini truth teller, and it's really impressive. And I know that Ian and Wolf are huge fans of yours. I know Truth Teller is as well. So I want to pass the mic to these guys and let you guys go ahead. Ian, you want to jump in there? I'm sure you got some questions.
Well, first and foremost, I just want to echo the sentiments and Ryan, to your comment there on Threads. I can certainly appreciate not only specifically the work that Gen X Girl has been doing, but just anybody and everybody. I know Truth Teller does a ton of them. I know Ryan, you as well. Destiny did an amazing thread that I was reading through the other day. And for what it's worth, just to call it out, I mean, some of these individuals where Truth Teller will have like a 20 post long thread, and each one of the pieces of that thread might have a 1, 2, 3 minute video clip or tons of text or tons of different supporting pieces of evidence. And on an application that often rewards, let's say really unhealthy intellectual calories, to put something together that is as dense and kind of protein packed as somebody like Gen X Girl or Truth Teller, it is a massive amount of work. And so I just want to call not only her work, but everybody else that's up here and part of this journey. And the question that I would have for Gen X Girl is, having basically unpacked this piece of the puzzle, right? And we're all kind of in this journey together, but how she thinks or has seen this exact same pattern playing out elsewhere, right? She was talking about initially a study that was funded by the very group that knew the outcome that they wanted, so they could then do a report on a study that they basically falsified. And it just goes to show how not only the expert opinions of so many of these quote unquote journalists, but even the very science, the data, the quote unquote trust the science folks, whether it's the academics or the doctors or whomever, they've got their intended outcome. They put together the piece of propaganda that supports it. Hillary Clinton did the exact same thing with the whole Russia collusion thing. And I'm not trying to make this a left-right question, but rather, Gen X girl, if this is a playbook that not only if you've seen the past, but if you perhaps saw, such a familiar pattern that it made it maybe easier than not to kind of put the pieces together.
I mean, no, absolutely. I mean, they're kind of, and it kind of makes me chuckle because a lot of people, I think Israelis love to promote how, how smart they are and how clever they are and how, innovative they are. But in this realm, it's really a copy paste. I mean, it's like, whatever they started in 2015. And they did start this thing called the Maccabee Task Force in 2015. And that was the start of this whole thing, right? How do you funnel money? How do you funnel direction? And you see the same pattern going into Congress as you see into NGOs, as we're now discovering is in religious groups. It's literally the same playbook over and over and over. But it's clever. It is clever that, it's not transparent. They're very good at using our legal system and, making sure that they have plenty of legal representation. They are doing things in a way that, skirt the law, but don't break the law outright, unless you lift the hood. Now, shout out to all the hackers in the last 2 years that have been hacking, the Israeli government, nonstop, because it's because of those hacks that we're able to learn what we're learning, because those documents have been, just an amazing treasure trove. If anybody ever goes into DDO secrets, I highly recommend you guys do it, because it's just amazing, and you can get, lost in there for hours. But, and they're also, these people at DDO Secrets, also the other great thing is a lot of these documents are in Hebrew, but they have staff that actually can translate them. So they'll translate these documents. So, it's like amazing. Just recently, I don't know if that article you guys saw that just Jack Paulson wrote, and then the Gray Zone wrote today as well, showed that, the David Ellison, Larry Ellison's son, who now owns CBS and is buying Bari Weiss's Free Press, that he literally was part of a group that the Israeli government was trying to find. They called them the 12 tribes originally, because they were looking for 12 rich Zionist Jewish billionaires in America who would fund this spying campaign that the Israeli government was trying to set up, using all sorts of technology to spy on pro-Palestine protesters and people who are critical of Israel. And surprise, surprise, these documents, the reason the story was even uncovered was through those hacked documents. And what they found out was David Ellison, Chaim Sabin, Sergey Brin, the Rothschilds. I mean, this is like the conspiracy, it made me chuckle reading the list, because I'm like, this is the conspiracy theorists, quote unquote conspiracy theorists' dream come true, because everything that people have been talking about all these years, here's a list with all these names, we've been hearing about it. I mean, to see the Rothschilds on their list of people they were going to reach out to fund this was just like, it was like icing on the cake. I was like, oh, this is too perfect. But my point is that this is how it's done, and it's always very similar pattern.
It looks like we got the legendary Sam Parker coming up to join us. I see you, Sam. Great to see you, brother. We're going to pass the mic to Sam here, too, in a few minutes after we guys get done with these questions. Truth, did you want to jump in here and add to the Gen X stuff?
No, I'm a big fan of her work, too. I'll definitely underscore that point. She's put together some incredible threads. And I'll just be honest, I was just looking at what Trump's claiming he's going to do, and then he's going to be speaking with the DOJ to give Ghislaine Maxwell a pardon. So I was just looking through some of the intel I have, because I might end up discussing that. I was going to go through a 10-7 space later. And by the way, I don't mean to self-promote, but when I saw this, I'm like, well, should I cover Ghislaine Maxwell's past so people are reminded about what she did and the fact that her authority might have actually superseded Epstein's in his household, and I can prove that based on the statements of one Alessi, who was Epstein's right-hand man before Ghislaine showed up.
Amazing. Don't you guys find it's amazing that, think about like when the Epstein stuff was, everyone was in an uproar, and all the craziness that's happened in between that's basically distracted everyone from it. And now here we are just a few months later with pardon.
Yeah, I mean, we could see it coming, right? When Todd Blanche was sent to the prison she was at the time in Tallahassee, Florida, he did a couple of days of interviews, and she did her best to make Trump out to be innocent, and attesting to the fact that she didn't see Trump do any wrongdoing, even though he'd been to the house numerous times. He'd allegedly been to Epstein Island. He'd had a best friend. He was Epstein's best friend for 10 years, knew him for over 15 years. They met in around 87 and then had a fallout in 2004. And she was there throughout that time. She would have seen a lot. And there's plenty of indications that Trump was straying. And of course, during that time when they were close friends, between 99 and 2004, Trump was running, of course, Trump Models, where he was actively, importing young girls from Eastern Europe and then, getting them contracts, bundling contracts, and then stealing most of their wages. I mean, one girl attested to the fact that she would have been earning at least $70,000 a year from her contract, but ended up with $5,000 over 3 years because of all the money that Trump took. So this is the definition of human trafficking. He was doing this, alongside Epstein, and it was in 2000 when he first poached Virginia Giuffre from Mar-a-Lago while Trump was there. So it had nothing to do with him poaching young girls. It was Ghislaine Maxwell that actually poached her too, by the way. She was the one that made the approach there, saying that he was looking for a mobile masseuse, even though she was 15 at the time.
15, yeah.
15 years old, that's correct. And there's one among many. I mean, there's also, of course, the 3 12-year-olds that Charlene Brunel sent him as well for her birthday. She was there throughout it all. And now she looks like she's on her way to getting a pardon, even though she's already been sent to basically a camp retreat, hardly a prison, in Texas right now, where she's got where she can take Pilates classes, yoga classes, buy makeup, hair coloring, and live almost a normal life. And there's no real fencing either. So she's already living pretty well. And there's work release options there too. But now she just may have her freedom back, and she's got coming back to at least $26 million in a trust that believe it or not, she was actually married. She married some guy, and he's holding that money for her in trust. And so, yeah, she could go back to a very lavish life if she's going to get a full pardon. But what did she offer? I thought it was in exchange for some kind of testimony, pointing the finger, or that there'd be some kind of arrest or something material. Nothing's happened, though. Trump's just going to give her the pardon anyway because, well, he's likely being blackmailed to do so or being told to do so ever since that one birthday letter came out that was published by the Wall Street Journal, which they authenticated, by the way. Rupert Murdoch authenticated it. It says it's real. Mary Trump also says the signature is legit. Trump sent it. And they have a lot more damning information on Trump that he obviously doesn't want released. So he's compromised for anyone that's doubting it. Now we may actually pardon a convicted child trafficker. Explain that one.
And let me add to that too, because... Yeah, let me add to that too, because it was Nick Bryant, and if you guys don't know Nick Bryant's work, he's one of the best journalists that has been laser focused on the Epstein from the very beginning. He's the one who actually purchased the Epstein's Black Book and actually published it. And you should hear his story when he talks about how hard it was for him to find a news outlet that would actually publish that book. None of them wanted to touch it, which is kind of crazy to think about. But he said that when Epstein got busted in 2005, that there was 2 victims under the age of 9 that their parents were willing to testify against Epstein, because Ghislaine Maxwell was raping these little girls with Epstein. So you're gonna pardon a woman who was literally raping 8-9-year-old girls or 8-year-old girls, however old they were, under the age of 9, with Epstein. And then Epstein went out and got work release and was literally going home while on work release after the first time he was charged with sexually abusing. I think there was 21 victims who came forward the first time that they basically gave this man a slap on the wrist and they let him walk. So that's kind of the person that Galena is. So go ahead, sorry, Truth. I didn't mean to jump in there, cut you off.
No, not at all. It's just, I could see it coming. I just didn't know it'd be this soon. I thought that he would at least wait till the midterms or maybe the end of his term to give her the pardon, but looks like they're really clamping down or putting pressure on him to get it done right away. So you see who's really in charge here, that, he's making it this obvious and announcing it in advance too. You think he'd be more discreet about it, but no, he's not. So I anticipate that she likely will get released. So I'll cover her crimes, the details of her crimes, probably in the next space, just so people are reminded of who Trump answers to and the fact that a Jewish human trafficker is going to get released. So it was amusing to me when that other lady, whose name I shall not announce, you had her earlier as co-host, tries to mention that, well, it's not all the Jews. There's good and bad Muslims, good and bad Christians, good and bad Jews. So they're not getting any type of special privilege here. Really? What if this was a Christian, Muslim, atheist, or someone else that was getting released? Would there not be an uproar? Would the Jews not be calling this out? And then perhaps she can answer for the fact as to why only the Jews allow for usury/Jewsery based on the 198th mitzvah that commands Jews to charge usurious race of the Gentiles and cause them to be subject to debt slavery. They do so both at the macro level and the micro level, which is why, there's trillions of dollars of debt, over 37 trillions of national debt, over $1.5 trillion of student loan debt, and over $250 trillion of unfunded liabilities because of Jewish usury, because no other religion, no other ethnic background, allows for usury. It's banned in every major religion, except for the Jews, and they allow for a loophole. And then why is it the Jews get access to kosher loans where they don't have to pay any interest on their loans when they lend to each other? It's only Jews that enjoy this privilege. So they get a head start in life before anyone else. Plus the fact that they're the highest earning ethnic minority and they're recognized as a special minority class that gets access to special loans and grants. So don't tell me we're all one and the same and treated the same. It's just not true. And I don't see any of these so-called good Jews protesting about that and saying that, it's unfair. We should all be treated equally under the eye of the law, and nobody should be getting any special privileges. But perhaps she's unaware of these facts, right, Ryan? We should just give her the benefit of the doubt that she just thinks, there's good and bad in every faith. They're all essentially should be looked at the same way, even though one is clearly more privileged than the next, and also overlook the fact that you've got, Larry Ellison that's creating his own little media empire, just like Robert Maxwell did, with his accumulation of all these networks, with his son now in charge, David Ellison, through Sky Dream taking over Paramount, CBS News, and also CNN as well, and then installing Barry Weiss and overpaying on her, a ridiculous multiple.
And True Skydance is looking to buy Warner Brothers as well.
Of course. And then, Ian, did you look up who the ombudsman is that David Ellison has installed to ensure there's going to be fairness and objectivity at CBS News?
Please tell me.
Kenneth Weinstein. Yeah. What's this guy known for? I mean, he's
Weinsteinberger.
That's correct. Right out of the Hudson Institute, which was founded by
Stein and a bag.
I know this guy's. He's the one that's going to be dealing with bias and unfair posts, or media, or any criticism from any outsiders, say Gentiles, who might say that there's a little too much obsessive coverage on Israel not doing any wrongdoing, and there seems to be censorship of Palestinian posts. I'm sure he's going to step up and do the right thing. The same guy that has pushed for increase in military expenditures, military supply sales, or without announcing any type of a conflict of interest. He was pushing for this while he was at the Hudson Institute. This guy's already got clear biases and his own objectives in mind, and now he gets to the ombudsman at CBS News, which Barry Weiss will oversee. She's going to be the chief executive or chief editor there, and she'll be answering to, of course, David Ellison, who is, of course, Larry Ellison's son. But yeah, I'm sure we're just supposed to overlook all that. And then was getting his way that, the chief battle for Israel and the Jews is in social media, which is why they now have essentially taken over TikTok. Larry Ellison controls the algo there, and they've taken over all these other news outlets as well, so they can control the narrative and all that's really left.
Did you,
no fuck Elon about that.
Did you hear that they're now even censoring talking about AIPAC?
Yeah, you're not allowed to do that on TikTok. They censored everything. They also don't want you talking about what I just mentioned, that Larry Ellison's created his own little media empire similar to what another Jew, Robert Maxwell, had. It's literally history repeating itself. But don't notice these obvious patterns here, because that's anti-Semitic. Don't just blame the Jews for taking over all these news sites.
I mean, a Jew's logo, a Jew's emoji, right? It's a very dangerous and anti-Semitic emoji now. So
yeah, so anything that hurts their feelings is just deemed anti-Semitic rather than acknowledgement or any type of accountability for crimes committed. And meanwhile, it's there's double speak from Netanyahu where he's supposedly going along with this new peace deal while telling his cabinet that they're not leaving Gaza, that they're going to carry on with their Greater Israel project, and tomorrow they'll be commemorating 10/7 like it's the worst ever atrocity since the Holocaust, neither of which really happened, because the Jews actually killed other Jews on 10/7 through the Hannibal Directive. They committed over 940 attacks on their own people, killed their own people, then they're claiming atrocity and want reparations for it. So again, this is the type of coverage and stuff that they're trying to limit. They don't want people telling the truth about 10/7, the Holocaust, or the truth about Jewish duplicity, which is just, it's based on a web of lies they've been weaving for many decades to be able to, again, portray themselves as a perpetual victim. And while they, stab you and mass murder those whom they deem the enemy, so which is anyone that speaks up against them. But yeah, Ryan, much to discuss, and keep the Epstein files alive too, because that's what they want to distract from. They don't want people talking about not just release of the Epstein files, but also follow-up arrests, prosecutions of the pedophiles, because Trump right now serves as the gatekeeper to protect all these pedophiles. But hey, man, trust the plan. Just look past all that. I'll pause there. Thanks for
real quick, Truth. So Ryan, just to add to this. So when I went back and I looked through and I was trying to understand who are all the biggest players in the media, right? Because you see this 96% number thrown around often. And I wanted to be able to simplify it so that when people would push back, I could say, no, the media is definitively owned by one collective set of interests. And so I looked up all the biggest institutions. The Comcast, that's basically the delivery mechanism, the Disney, the Amazon that brings you Prime, right? Went through line by line. And I got to Verizon thinking, well, that's one of the biggest delivery mechanisms. That's got to be a Jewish guy. And it's this guy, Hans Zellberg, who was the CEO until today, because Dan Schulman was just announced, formerly a PayPal guy, linked, of course, to Thiel and Elon. And so now good old Dan Schulman has Verizon, which according to Grok is responsible for over a third of all media delivered to all Americans. And so, yes, just another massive logo that's in the hands of the same set of interests. Between Comcast and Verizon alone, it's almost 70 to 80% of all media delivered to the American households. And it's in the hands of two different individuals, both from the same set of interests.
They're just never ending with these people. I don't understand how you can continue to sit here and go, yep, I'm an American citizen. I'm so excited to wake up, go be a debt slave for some Jews in Israel, and my kids are going to grow up in a world where obviously it's not even safe to walk down the streets in this country in any major city at this point. Infrastructure is falling apart. We have literally buildings last week were collapsing in New York, an apartment complex, what it looked like anyways. The entire half of the building just completely crumbled and fell off. I was like, what in the hell? So our buildings are falling apart. You can't afford to feed your kids. You can't even afford to have you can't even really afford to get separated anymore. You have to have two parents that pretty much work full time. One parent has to work overtime just to keep a roof over a kid's head, because our country is just in such a massive shithole right now because of this one group of people. I don't know how they put this back in the bottle. I don't know if it's even possible. Even if they banned when they censor anything, so many people are awake. It's not going to be hard to get everybody to go to a platform like Nostr.
It's going to be a financial collapse, Ryan. Did you see the 10%? There's a 10% inflation on the dollar again just this week.
No, so is that what they were? I know that the IMF was saying that it was
the dollar just dropped 10% more. Yep, it's getting worse and worse. The dollar is getting worse and worse. This year's been one of the worst years, ever. And that's why you think this Bitcoin push is happening, and this crypto push has been happening, and all these things are happening. And then a stimulus check for $2,000 he's talking about again. Well, Craven, the money's worthless. It doesn't matter.
Hey, and Wolf, can you speak to this or Truth Teller? Because I'd be really curious for all the listeners. There's almost 2,000 people in here. And Ryan, unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people connect the very basic dots that the endless bull run of Bitcoin as a store of value, it is as much a reflection of the dollar decrease as it is the perceived value in Bitcoin itself. And a lot of people just don't understand that fundamental market mechanic. And it's the same thing with housing prices and all the other things that are obviously getting more expensive. But it's not just the means of production for those goods. It's not just housing shortages. It's that the thing you're buying these things with is becoming essentially worthless in front of our eyes.
Yeah, well, let me add to that, right? So if you guys haven't been following my work, I used to just be a Bitcoin maximalist, and I got sucked into this world, and I've been trying relentlessly to get out of it as much as humanly possible. I'd much rather be sitting at my computer talking about Bitcoin than doing anything political related. But, I got into child trafficking, and that we're going to see that one through. So where I'm going with this is, my buddy Joe Brown from Heresy Financial, he did an amazing breakdown on inflation over the last 50 years. So he's talking about comparing, and he went through and he compared a bunch of different things, right? So like you can't go, oh, what is a radio priced in 1975 versus what a radio priced today? In 75, every house across America pretty much had a radio. Now everybody's got a cell phone in the car, and we pretty much don't have radios in every house. So he only compared things that you could actually compare. So like, let's talk about your first starter car. So he went through and he took like the three averages of like the three basic, like nowadays it'd be like a Honda Civic, a Ford Focus, and a whatever, car would be basically your starter car, manual windows, no power, anything, just basically the plain Jane off the lot. What was the best price that you could get it for? And I believe it was $1,700 for it was like a T-Bird or whatever car it was back then. The average of the three was $1,700. Today, that same car is $4,300, and that's just your basic starter car right off the lot, new, without any bells and whistles. Now, and I might be off on these. It was either $1,700 or $2,700, but the analogy is still the same. And so, today, again, 50 years later, that car is $43,000. Now, he did the same thing with your starter house. So what was a 3-bedroom ranch house with a 2-car garage on a half-acre lot? The price of that piece of real estate, the average one across America, was $23,000 and like $700, give or take. Today, that same house is like $450,000 or $456,000. So at that inflation rate over the previous 50 years, if we just replicated that, and I know everybody that's in this space has realized like inflation has gotten exponentially out of control, specifically since COVID-19, really. But if you look at over the last like basically 10 years, the rate of inflation is way more than it was over the entire course of the 50 years previously. But let's just say we just accelerated at the same rate, and somehow we managed, our government got their shit under control, and they kind of went back to how they were in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even into the early 2000s, and they continued on that trajectory over the next 50 years. Your kid's first car, if you bought them a brand new car off the lot, would be $890,000. Your first house, their first starter house, your great-great-grandchildren, is going to be $6.3 million. So another analogy is if you were to take $1 million today, and we just use that same type of devaluation that we've used over the last 100 years, and let's just say you're like, okay, I want to leave my great-grandchildren $1 million. I've worked my whole life away. I don't want it to leave it in a bank and there be a bank run. I don't trust gold. I just want to, for some reason, have dollars. And I'm going to go get $1 million in $100 bills, and I'm going to bury them in a safe with a map in my backyard, and I'm going to give this to my great-great-great-grandkids when they turn, whenever they're born and whatnot. In 100 years, what they would be able to buy with that $1 million would be $899 or $892 worth of items today. So that's the rate that your government is just devaluing your currency. And you think back when you were a kid, it's like you used to get a haircut that used to cost you $5, right? And you're in the same barbershop, they're using the same pair of scissors in the same chair in the same building, and now that same haircut costs you $30. The scissors didn't get more expensive, that nothing got more expensive, right? It's the value of our dollar is depreciating at a rate that is so exponential, most Americans can't even realize it. And by the time you do realize it, you're getting so crushed. And this, I just tell this to everybody, and I ask everybody in the space to say, what is the first time you heard about Bitcoin? And people will tell you 2012. Oh, I heard about it in 2009 when it was 9 cents. I had this buddy at a bar. Or they'll say 2014 or 2016 or 2018. And I say, okay. So today, there is nothing more beneficial or more important than you can do today, right now. Leave this space. Don't watch another podcast. Don't do shit. The most important thing that you can do for you and your family is to understand Bitcoin and what it is and how it works. And then I want you to, and it's going to take you 20 hours of just watching and consuming. I want you to go start with, Banking on Bitcoin, which is a documentary from a long, long time ago. But it shows you the early days of Bitcoin and how exciting this revolution has been for those of us who have been on it since, not from the very beginning. I got in 2014, and I didn't really start getting focused in it until 2015 when I was one of the first people on YouTube teaching you guys how to mine Ethereum, back when we can do it with a desktop and Ethereum was $2.64. So I've been in the game for a really long time and it's been a really interesting journey. But my point I'm trying to make is that it's going to take you 20 hours of just watching content and consuming it to even get wrap your head around what Bitcoin actually is. And then it's going to take you roughly 120 hours. I mean, it's a lot. It's dedication. It's not simple. That's why you have this opportunity to buy it for $100,000. And this is why you had this opportunity to buy it for $1,000 back in 2015, right? The farther back you go, the less education and content there was out there and the less people understood it, the higher the opportunity was, right? You're still in a world where roughly 99% of the world, maybe even 95% of the world still doesn't have a clue what Bitcoin is. So you are so early, you have no idea. And there's no greater gift that you can give yourself. And to land this plane and make this point. So if you would have taken my advice and you go think back from the first time you heard about Bitcoin, you would have heard somebody say these exact words: quit doing everything you're doing and go study Bitcoin. Within 20 hours of studying, you would have started to buy it. Within 120 hours, you would have really started to understand, okay, I need to get this into a cold storage, air-gapped, multi-sig wallet. I need to get it off an exchange. I know how to buy it. I know how to trade it. I know how to borrow against it as a collateralized asset, so I don't actually have to sell my Bitcoin. You learn all these things. And my point being, it doesn't matter when you would have said, was it 2012, was it 2014, 16, 18? At that point, if you would have taken my advice and done that, how much better would you be in a position today if you would have been putting, 25% of your paycheck into Bitcoin for the last 4 years or the last 8 years or the last 12 years? And it's a no-brainer. And it's going to be the same thing 4 years from now. So I implore everybody, right? I'm not trying to sell you anything. I don't own any Bitcoin that I'm trying to pawn off on you. It's not a shit coin like whatever, name your meme coin or dog coin that somebody created. And it's going to be the next decentralized whatever.
Not financial advice, by the way.
Oh, no, this is 100% financial advice. Pawn your fucking wedding ring, pawn your second house, pawn your fucking kids' Legos, sell every asset that you fucking have to your name that you don't need to survive for the next year, and fucking put 100% of it in Bitcoin. I don't give a fuck what anybody says.
Not financial advice. I'm
100%
protecting you, Ryan. Not financial advice.
Great. Go pawn your wife's wedding ring right now. Tell her she'll appreciate it later. You can sleep in a doghouse. It'll probably save you a little extra cash anyways.
I love you, Ryan, but not financial advice.
Why? It's Bitcoin. I don't own the asset.
Cough.
Fuck yeah.
Hey, real quick. I want to back up.
That's a legal disclaimer on behalf of Ryan Matta and Present Space.
I want to back up Ryan real quick on when it comes down to the inflation. I put a little thing up there in the nest. It took Croc literally like 2 minutes to figure it out. I could have just said it. Oh wow, now someone else posted something. Hang on, let me. Okay, that's truth teller. Anyways, 92% devaluation of the dollar in 70 years. 92%, my friends. So let that sink in. And when we talk about the golden age and when we talk about, everything's going to be fantastic and everything's going to be rainbows and all that good stuff, you got to think twice about this, right? So anyways, just want to make everybody aware of that, all right? That's how bad the dollar is looking currently.
Yeah, and let me add to that too, right? So right now you have no buyer. Nobody's buying treasuries, right? Nobody's buying U.S. debt. Nobody thinks that investing in the United States is a good investment at this point, right? So what does that mean for the fact that China's dumping off all their treasuries? Japan's dumping off their treasuries. Nobody wants U.S. debt. Nobody wants to hold it, but we're $38 trillion in debt, and your government desperately needs to print more money. Like you see, even the Trump administration, he came in and we thought this man was going to rein in this out of control radical spending in our government, and then he goes and passes the largest defense spending budget in human history and gives them $1 trillion budget. So in order to buy treasuries, and nobody's buying treasuries, they passed the Stablecoin Act. And what does the Stablecoin Act force them to do? It forces the stablecoin holders to, I believe, is it like 50% of their balance sheet has to be held in U.S. securities. So as the price of Bitcoin goes up, you have an exchange, and I'm just going to try to simplify this, right? You have what's called a liquidity pool, and they have these automated liquidity pools. So on an exchange, you have, let's just say $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. You basically need $1 billion worth of a stable coin to keep that liquidity pool kind of stabilized. And as people want more Bitcoin and they buy Bitcoin, and there's less Bitcoin on the exchange, but there's more of the stable coin on the exchange, if that makes sense. And it kind of keeps this balance, and that's how they take the average of, I don't know how many, 6 exchanges across the world, and they give you like the fair market value of Bitcoin, and that's what keeps the market price of Bitcoin. So one exchange, technically, all exchanges by law are supposed to follow the market price. So you'll see two tickers that how they can liquidate you or take you out of a trade. There's the exchange price, which is the price of Bitcoin on that exchange. If you wanted to buy it, that's the price you're going to get it for. And then there's like the combined average price of Bitcoin across like the top 6 or 8 exchanges. And that in order for an exchange to basically stomp you out of a trade or take you out of a trade, they're supposed to use the market value of Bitcoin. Okay, so in order to, so like if let's just say that the Trump announces tomorrow that the Fed is going to start printing dollars to buy Bitcoin, what's going to happen? That's going to drive the price of Bitcoin up. It's going to force, let's just say if the United States government says, well, we're going to buy $100 billion worth of Bitcoin. We're going to print these dollars out of thin air and do it. It's going to force every Fed around the world to pretty much follow suit and do the same thing. So all these other countries announce they're going to print to start buying Bitcoin, and the price of Bitcoin goes from $100,000 to $1 million. Okay, right now it's at 100,000. Let's just say it's 125,000. Let's just round to keep it simple. That there's a $2 trillion market cap. With that $2 trillion market cap, there's probably what, 500 billion, maybe even $1 trillion out there in all stable coins across all the markets. So what that means is that as Bitcoin goes up to $1 trillion or $1 million and 10x's from here, the liquidity for those stable coins is also going to increase exponentially with Bitcoin. So as you drive up the price of Bitcoin, you force demand for more stable coins. And as these stable coin providers have to take your dollars and go and put those dollars into treasuries, your stable coin buyers become the only buyer for Bitcoin, or the only buyer for US debt. So the only way that he could literally figure this out is to revalue the price of gold, which I think we're going to see happen very soon, and then also drive the price of Bitcoin up. And he doesn't have to necessarily do it by buying it with US dollars, right? They can pretty much eliminate the US debt, or cover this up and kick the can down the road like they did when they took us off the gold standard and like they did with the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1942. There is one way out of this, but really it sounds like the only way out of this is by Bitcoin going up exponentially in price, and then there being this massive demand for stable coins, which then creates a buyer for US treasuries. So either way, I think the only way that we're getting out of this is with Bitcoin, and that's if we're fucking lucky, right? Bitcoin's going to millions of dollars no matter what, in my personal opinion. So take that advice for what you.
Well, I'm glad he's breaking up. I would like you to check Signal, Ryan.
I say it, brother. It's not investing advice. Bitcoin is not a security, right? I'm no legally bound to anything. I'm not selling you something I own. I'm not promoting something that a company has. It's fucking Bitcoin. And there's never been a bad time to buy Bitcoin. The only risk to having Bitcoin is not having any Bitcoin, right? So take that for what it is. You guys can take it for what you want. Put your life savings into it. That's what I fucking did. Not investing advice, if that makes you better. But I don't believe in that shit. I think it's the fucking only way out of this. And it's literally, I would be fucking homeless right now if it wasn't for Bitcoin. I would never be able to do any of this. I would never been able to make any documentaries. I would literally be fucking living at my parents' house or in a van down by the river, trying to be a father to my son somehow, most likely fucking working at McDonald's or whatever shit job I could get. Miserable at life, being a shitty father because I'm so miserable and in such a debt fucking based society that I have no future and no hope. So anyways, that's it. I just
God bless you. I know you're Bitcoin Moxie. I'm just here, right? I love you, bro. But obviously, Ryan is not a financial advisor, right? This is not financial advice, right? Everything is at your own risk if you invest in crypto. God bless you, Ryan.
Not crypto, just Bitcoin, brother.
Just Bitcoin, right?
Hey, Ryan, can I just back you up here? Because it is financial advice on purpose. Well, here's the thing, is we have a $38 trillion debt. You have 3 ways to get rid of it. One of them is raise taxes. That's not going to happen. That's political suicide. You can let in a bunch of immigrants, but you'd have to replace 30%. You'd have to let in 30% of the population. That's also not going to happen. Americans don't want that. Number 3 is you can either devalue the currency or increase the amount of GDP. So AI is not going to do that. So by 2031, when our debt comes due, U.S. needs to devalue the dollar by at least 30%. Look at total money printed, add another 30%. That's double what Bitcoin's worth today. That would have to go into bearer assets, which are either real estate, gold, silver, and Bitcoin. Buying stock is foolish. Banks can take your stock. They have first right on your stock. Bearer assets are the only assets that actually matter. So once again, real estate, gold, silver, and Bitcoin.
Thanks, Joe. God bless you, man.
Brother. Thank you for clarifying all that. Good job.
And I know we wanted to jump in, so Colin.
Well, real quick, Joe. Real quick. I'm sorry, Ryan. Real quick.
Yeah,
Did you hear that Trump is?
Hey, I just want to say I don't know anything about Bitcoin personally, and I don't. That's just a guy talking on a space. I don't know nothing about this shit. He might be right. He might be wrong. I do believe that gold and silver is going to keep going up, and I do believe that the dollar is tanking. But I don't know that Bitcoin is a good store of value. I don't know nothing about that shit.
If he actually this year or by next year he's going to pay off the entire debt in crypto or Bitcoin? I think Bitcoin, most likely.
Look, I had a theory before that, America has a card to play. I really hope they don't play it, but they do have a card to play, which is if they were to actually make a huge Bitcoin reserve and dump their gold, they would nuke every other country's reserves. And by far and large become the wealthiest country on the planet. Although I have Bitcoin, I hope he doesn't do that, to be honest, because I think it would create a mess worldwide.
Well, look at the Louisiana Purchase. He doesn't even necessarily need to do it with gold. He could just announce that we're gonna buy $1 trillion worth of Bitcoin. Literally, he could announce that, or not a trillion, but yeah, he could literally announce that he's gonna buy $1 trillion worth of Bitcoin for the United States, sign an executive order, make the purchase, and that, you'd do it behind closed doors, so you'd accumulate all of that Bitcoin, which you'd probably see it go from, 125 to what, maybe 200,000 in a very short period of time as they're slowly buying. And then the day that he announces that the United States is now holding $1 trillion worth of Bitcoin, it would trigger every single country around the world to do the same. And like you said, it would be even smarter if they, were to say that they've sold off, they revalue the price of gold and then they ended up selling off half of their reserves to buy Bitcoin and doing that on the slow. But we've done it with the Louisiana Purchase. Michael Saylor did a really good breakdown on the amount of times that the government has, used the Federal Reserve to make massive purchases that at the time thought were crazy. But, you look at some of these purchases that we've made before, and they've been very, very beneficial. And he kind of equates that to the same exact thing.
Well, if you're going to devalue the dollar, which I believe he's doing, and a lot of economists agree, purposefully. So it's one way to get out of this debt that we have. It is the largest bill besides the U.S. military spending that we have currently. One way to hedge that is to buy gold or buy Bitcoin. And if you look basically just at returns, buying Bitcoin would be a better option, simply to hedge the fact that you're nuking the dollar. So it completely makes sense. That's why, I wish more people really understood how money worked, because it makes a lot of sense. It's not, funny internet money. And this doesn't hold true for every other crypto, but it does hold true for Bitcoin.
Thank you, brother. And I know, Truth, you want to jump in there for a second? I was going to jump over to Cullen. Cullen did a really good breakdown. I want to get into that, but go ahead, Truth. You want to jump in?
A quick comment to that. And well, if you're wondering why most people, the average person lacks basic financial literacy, well, who controls the textbooks, right? Last I checked, what is it? McGraw-Hill Education that deliberately omits, important lessons on how taxation, inflation, unemployment, the Federal Reserve and how the economy actually works, because they don't want people to know, while they continue to devalue the dollar and make life very expensive for the average Gentile, but not the Jews, because they get all kinds of perks. So again, it's done by design. You mentioned the symptom, the problem, you should also mention the cause.
God bless you, Truth. You're the man, brother. And I want to jump over to Cullen. So if you guys haven't been paying attention over the last couple of weeks, pretty much since my account started blowing up and we started putting on these bigger Twitter spaces, this gentleman named Soleimani, he runs these really massive Twitter spaces. I know a lot of people like him, think he's a good dude. I don't really have a problem with him. Now I do, but never previously had a problem with him. He invited me to be in his spaces, spoke, he's had some issues with Truth Teller, mainly just getting cocky and too big for his own britches. So that's mainly the main thing that people have said about him. So I just let it go. And for about 5 days straight, everybody was hitting me up. I went on to Kim Iverson's podcast. She brought this dude up. I won't name any other names, but every single day for like a week straight, there was different Twitter spaces that this guy was hosting, just basically talking shit about me, saying that I was capitulating on Tim Pool's podcast and all this. It's just stupid shit, right? So I made a post and I fucking called him out about it. I was just going to roast the dude and just leave it at that. Then Cullen ended up finding out and hearing that he was, going after me or talking shit about me or whatever. And Cullen was, let me look into this guy. So Cullen started to look into this guy, and what Cullen uncovered was pretty fucking startling and pretty fucking crazy. So I don't know who this guy is. This is probably the last time I ever fucking talk about him. I don't give a shit about what he says or he just sounds like a complete fraud and a fucking grifter. So I wanted to put this on your radar. And Cullen did this amazing deep dive into him. I've went through it. I've made videos on it. I've listened to it, but it's still like above my pay grade. So I'm going to let Cullen, he does this amazing breakdown on it. I'm going to kind of hand him the mic and let him explain what he's uncovered. We'll put it up in the nest so that way you guys can go and be judges for yourself, and we'll kind of get into this. So go ahead, Cullen. Thanks for the amazing work you did, brother, and thanks for joining us.
Oh, well, thanks, man. I appreciate it, and thanks for the kind words as well.
And let me state this too, right? I didn't ask Cullen to do this. I didn't ask anybody to come and dig into anybody or investigate anybody. This was just good dudes being good dudes and doing what they fucking did. And the evidence is out there, and the report needs to be heard by everybody, so that way you can make your decisions. As this dude probably spends the next year of his life probably trying to relentlessly attack me. This is the truth, and this is how it all got started. So go ahead, brother.
Yeah, exactly. Just so everybody knows, I just saw him attack Ryan, and I was very confused about that because I know a bunch of people here on X, especially Spaces hosts, and Ryan's one of the guys that I know is, dude, he's putting his money on the line and his safety on the line, doing the things that he does. He's put out quality content, and he's always been a good guy. So whenever Suleiman started attacking him, I was like, well, you know what? Let me see if there's any fucking dirt on Suleiman because he's attacking my friend. And I was assuming that perhaps there'd be something superficial like most people kind of have. But the thing is about Suleiman is that he's doing some very, very shady stuff. And honestly, he is participating in the same stuff that he talks about on a day-to-day basis, this IOs and this government control and all of this stuff. He's participating in some of these systems that were created by these exact people, right? So as far as I'm concerned, I want to make it clear to everybody that this isn't me or anybody else trying to focus on not the problem or whatever, right? The Jewish supremacy, Israel, Zionism, all of that stuff is by far the main problem, sure. But at the end of the day, whenever we've got bad actors, in our midst and they've got stuff that they're doing like this, then we have to call it out. Another thing that I want to preface here is that none of the stuff that I'm going to say today is like inference or anything like that. There's a bunch of speculation that you can make about Suleiman for other things, but all the stuff we're going to talk about today comes from sources that are directly from the US or the UK government, specifically this organization called Ofsted, which is essentially the equivalent of the Department of Education here in the United States. They do a lot of things like yearly, supposedly they're supposed to do inspections every 3 years at private schools, but when schools start acting up, sometimes inspections can become much more frequent, and you'll see, we'll get into that later. So the other thing is that I want to make it very clear the claims that I'm making about Suleiman here, right? The claim that I'm making is that Suleiman is a non-Englishman, okay? Whether or not he was born in the UK or not, I don't care. He is someone whose family is benefiting from, the UK's government system, okay? And he knowingly used the gracious charity laws of the UK, which is not his country, for his own personal gain, his family's personal gain, and for Islam's personal gain as well. We're going to tie this into a few things. I don't have a problem with Islam and Islamic countries and things like this. I don't have a problem with Muslims. I do have a problem with Islamification of Europe. I do have a problem, which again is a problem that's caused by Israeli and Jewish supremacy, but that doesn't mean that this stuff is okay. And this kind of Islamification where you're taking advantage of UK charity laws in order to spread this kind of stuff is not okay in my book. I'm not making the claim that he didn't pay taxes because we don't know how much taxes he paid or didn't pay. The way the UK charity laws are set up, if you keep the revenue under £623,000 per year, like every single one of his schools were, you can do your own internal audits where you can do things like say you donated all of your money to charity, and so as such you don't need to pay taxes. Again, I'm not saying that Suleiman did this specifically because I don't have his tax records, but what we do know for sure is that he had a fake charity where he deposited the funds from his private school and used that charity to hire his family, to hire his friends, and to hire really anybody that he wanted. We will get into a bunch of things like the Ofsted reports that talk about how he didn't do appropriate background checks, how he didn't check to see even if a lot of his teachers were eligible to work in the UK, for example. So essentially, we don't have any evidence that he didn't pay taxes, but we can guarantee from a UK charity inquiry that came out in 2017 from the UK Charity Commission investigation that he did misappropriate funds unlawfully and used a fake charity, claiming that that was the thing that all of his school funds were essentially charity funds. And in the UK, the charity laws are the same as the US, but a little bit more lenient. You have income tax exemptions. And there's a little tidbit that's extra nice. Again, I'm not saying Suleiman did this because we've got no records of his tax records, okay? This is not public. But in the UK, if you're a charity and you receive donations from a UK taxpayer, you're eligible to get a 25% boost on those donations as well. So that's the UK charity law, okay? That's kind of the preface to this whole thing. This is what we're kind of the problems that Suleiman participated in. To kind of boil it all down, he misappropriated funds, used charity loophole systems, which would allow someone to be able to avoid taxes. Again, I'm not saying that he did, but it would allow someone to. He hired his friends and family, which is against UK charity law. And his schools were a shithole. We're going to get into the Ofsted reports where these Muslim schools had shared bathrooms, okay, for the children that were under 8 years old. We're going to get into how they didn't have hot water in some of the secondary school bathrooms. We're going to get into how, Suleiman claimed that they had passing colors and flying colors on all of their Ofsted reports. Out of the 8 Ofsted reports that all of his schools have had, 5 of them have had issues. 3 of them have been outright failures, and 2 of them have been good, but none of them have been deemed outstanding, okay? The highest rank you can have is outstanding in a few different categories for various metrics, such as, like, teacher, like the ability for teachers to teach, whether or not they're following the curriculum, and then just, like, basic stuff that we were just talking about, like whether or not the facilities are running correctly. So we'll get into all that, but I think that the first thing we should do is get into the charity stuff specifically, because that's kind of the most scandalous stuff, and then we'll get into how the schools were a shithole after. So before we get into the timeline here, because it does bounce around a little bit, does anybody have any questions?
Nah, brother, run it. You're killing it.
Here we go. Okay, so the first thing that we found out about Suleiman, and this is in the UK's business registry. Much like the US, if you have a business, well, depending on what state you're in, but in the UK it doesn't, they don't have states. If you have a public business, a private business rather, your name is going to be on UK registries for whatever business that is. So the first thing that we find, the first sort of initial appearance for Suleiman inside the UK business registry is for a company called ILM Academy. ILM Academy Limited. Supposedly started in 2011 and was dissolved by 2012. I'm not going to name all of their names because I don't think it's you can go look at it on the public record if you want, but I don't know what his family has to do with it anymore. But in this company, he had a whole bunch of his family members hired, or well, perhaps they weren't his family. There was a whole bunch of people with his names, with his same last name, that were hired on ILM. We'll get into how we know that it was his family later on, but by 2011, we don't know.
All right, we're at 2.5 hours. If y'all want to go, listen to the rest of this, it's under this guy Ryan Matta on X. I have to get to work, and my air conditioner isn't working, so I have to leave my crane wide open. It's fixing to get loud as hell, and so y'all are not going to enjoy the stream anymore. Alright, I got to, so I'm going to shut it down. Y'all have a good day. I appreciate y'all tuning in. Thank you.